Hi, my name is Bruce Bernet. Currently, I'm the national freestyle coach for the United States. During my coaching career, I've put together a comprehensive technique syllabus. Although this technique syllabus doesn't cover every aspect of wrestling, and certainly doesn't cover all the techniques that are involved in wrestling, I feel it does cover the basic skills and key techniques that are essential in the development of any athlete. USA Wrestling has now put this technique syllabus on videotape. I sincerely believe that this video series can benefit any club, coach, or athlete. We wish you nothing but the best in your quest for gold. I feel basic skills are the most important aspect of wrestling. It's a foundation for all techniques. Oftentimes, wrestlers just want to learn technique. They want to see a move and then try to copy that move. But basic skills are the key elements and the mechanics of how each technique works. You need to work and build on the basic skills before you can go to the technique. I've identified 12 basic skills that I feel are essential in winning technique. The first basic skill is stance or position. That's the most important thing in wrestling. And there's two key points about a person's stance and position. First, it has to be comfortable for you. Second, you have to be relaxed in a stance. You have to be comfortable in it, because that's where matches are won and lost. On all levels, what wrestlers are trying to do is get their opponent out of position, create an angle so they can score. To do that, they have to get a wrestler out of position. So the most important thing in wrestling, and the first skill, is position. There's two types of stance. A square stance, where my feet are equal. I want my feet shoulder width, I want my head up, I want my back straight, and I want my elbows in and my palms slightly pointed down. I'm on the balls of my feet. I'm not on my heels. I don't want any space. Square stance from the side. I don't want any space so you can see under my toes. I want that wrestler slightly leaning forward. I want my shoulders in line with my knees. This is a square stance here. A couple things about a square stance. Anytime you see a wrestler in a square stance, keep in mind that for me to do an offensive move, I have to get my opponent coming to me or leaning on me. That's the only way that I can get in a position where I can score.
Let's look at this square stance in a live or real wrestling situation. Weight is slightly forward on the balls of the toes. Feet are approximately shoulder width apart. Shoulder over the knee. Back straight. Head up. Elbows are in and palms are slightly down. Notice that blue is working primarily from a square stance and he's forcing red to move into him. This is essential if he wants to set up an offensive technique from a square stance. He needs to have his opponent moving into him or leaning on him.
The second stance is a staggered stance, where I have one foot in front of the other. Again, my elbows are in, my head is up, my back is straight, and my palms are slightly pointed down. And again, I'm on my toes, the balls of my feet, my shoulders stay in line with my knees in this position. As you can see, when I turn just a little bit, I'm now in a square stance. When I turn back, I'm in a staggered stance. In this position, this staggered stance, which some people call a drop step, I'm already in position to penetrate to my opponent. So anytime you see a wrestler that stays in this stance, he's ready to penetrate more quickly. His motion will go forward and back way easier than it can go sideways.
Let's take a look at this staggered stance and some live action footage with Olympic and world champion John Smith. Notice John's in a very low position, weight forward on the balls of his toe, shoulder, knee, toe, all in line. Back straight, head up. Elbows are in, and the palms slightly down. Here's another example with the Olympic silver medalist and world champion Zeke Jones. Once again, notice his feet are about shoulder width or slightly greater apart. Shoulder, knee in line, elbows in where they can protect, palms slightly down, head up, back straight. From here, he's able to move in both the backward and forward motion quite freely, and notice how he uses a drop step to set up penetration on a single leg takedown.
So again, the two stance, square stance, feet shoulder width, head up, back straight, elbows in this position is mainly for defense and lateral motion. Second, the staggered stance in this position is mainly for offense. I can move forward and backwards way easier than I can move laterally. Which brings us to our second skill, which is motion. Anytime I'm in position, I have to get to my opponent, or if my opponent's coming to me, I have to try to create an angle on him. So I have to have motion. Out of a square stance, anytime I move, anytime I'm in position here, and anytime I need to create motion, I want to take short, choppy steps. And some basic rules to remember. When one foot moves, my other foot moves. I don't move one and then try to move the other. When I move one foot, the other one moves. So I'm constantly in good position, which is the most important thing in wrestling. Keep in mind, when I move here, I'm not picking my feet up. I'm doing shuffle steps. I move my feet 4 to 6 inches. Another basic rule. When my hands move, my feet move. So that I'm constantly staying in good position so that anytime I stop, it's the same as when I start the match. Anytime I have motion in this position here, whether I'm circling, moving laterally, or moving back, my feet are shoulder width, my head is up, and my back is straight. Right? I don't pick my feet up, I shuffle, move 4 to 6 inches at a time. Now in a staggered stance, in this position, it's the same. If I'm going to move forward here, short, choppy steps. When my hands move, my feet move. When I move one foot, I immediately move the other. Don't leave them so you get overextended. Right? Those are the two basic skills that we start with in wrestling. Position's 1, motion is 2.
Here we see lateral motion from a square stance. As they tie up, we begin to see some circular motion and off balancing. again circular motion to stay square with the opponent. Red moves into a staggered stance in the square stance, moving both forward and laterally. Blue switches to a staggered stance, drops in on a takedown. Red is in a square and is able to defend. Here we see an example of forward and backward motion, slight lateral direction to it from a staggered stance. Another example here.
The third basic skill that we're going to talk about today is changing levels. So we've had position, the most important skill, we've had motion, and now we're going to change levels. For me to get to my opponent and penetrate to my opponent, I have to stay in good position and at the same time change levels. When I change levels, I'm going to change levels at my hips. I'm going to change levels here. All the time that I'm changing levels, I stay in good position. So that anytime I freeze in this position right here, my feet are shoulder width, my head is up, and my back is straight. You'll see a lot of wrestlers at times that appear not to be in real good position. But that's because there's a distance between him and his opponent. If you watch all the good wrestlers, the closer they get to their opponent, the better position and the better stance they're in. So when I change levels and I move towards my opponent, when I'm moving in and I'm going to change levels, I stay in good position. I believe in the concept of position of a high hand and a low hand. I always protect my lead leg. So anytime I change levels, I'm coming down, but I'm always protecting my lead leg and one hand up in here. My elbows are still in. I can be here. That's not that bad when I change levels, but I'm changing levels at the hips. So if I had my partner and we're in this position right here and he's in good stance and I'm going to change levels, all I'm going to do is concentrate before my attack, change levels here, but to stay in good position.
Here's a slow motion example of this level change within a stance. Again at normal speed. Here's an example of a level change to a low-level single shot by John Smith. Watch Kenny's level change to a double leg takedown. Not only does he change levels going down, but he changes levels again coming up as he sets up a finish on the double. Again at normal speed.
The fourth basic skill in wrestling is penetration. I have to be able to get to my opponent. And you've got to keep in mind when I do this, when I penetrate, I stay in good position. Before I can ever penetrate, I have to change levels, I have to have motion, and when I do this, I have to stay in good position. If I don't stay in good position, it gives my opponent an opportunity to score. Actually, there's three types of penetrations. One, there's a drop step, or a step in. I call those two penetrations the same. And anytime I penetrate in those two situations, I'm going to use what I call an inside step. And the reason I do that is very simple. If my opponent is stationary or moving away from me, I have to take my body to him. So I have to be able to travel. And when I do that, I'm going to pound, step, and now I'm going to drive over my knee, staying in good position the whole time, but I'm going to act like there's glass on the mat. I want a reaction like there's glass on the mat, right here. And as soon as this knee touches the mat, it's going to come up. Now, as soon as I drive off of this back leg, it's done all the work it's going to do. The next part of the work for this leg is to be up here so I can cut an angle. It immediately comes up, and I'm across here. Right? So my inside step is a pound, step. When I drive over, it's going to hit broken glass on the mat. It wants to come up immediately, and this trail leg comes up immediately in this position. Don't stay down there. Always try to come up. So the first step is an inside step, keeping in mind that my opponent is stationary or he's moving away from me, and I have to get to him. So pound, step, drive, leg comes up immediately, and I'm in good position again. Watch what I do with my opponent here. When I do this, and I do an inside step, actually, there's 5 places on my opponent that I could step to. I could step here, 4 to 5 inches to the outside, 4 to 5 inches to the inside, directly in the middle, 4 to 5 inches here, or 4 to 5 inches here. Those are the only places that I should really step to on my attack. I don't want to step too far. I want to step about toe to toe. But those are the 5 areas that I can attack with my penetration. When I talk about an inside step, what I'm going to do is step to my opponent, and I can pound, step, and drive, or I can just step in. I can just step in. Some wrestlers don't like to pound, step, and drive. They feel like they're giving themselves away to their opponent. So they use what they call a step in. But the steps are still the same. All right? So you have to keep in mind that I'm going to inside step here. Okay, on this penetration step where I'm using an inside step, I'm going to step to my opponent, and it's very important for me to start to get an angle on my opponent. Remember, if he's stationary or moving away from me, I have to get to him. Right? So from this position, I'm going to pound, step, toe-to-toe, knee drives. Now I'm going to follow up here into this position. The best place to finish is up on your feet. It's going to make it easier for me to score there. So that's what I want to drill. When I drill that position, I want to be able to go through and up to my feet and be in good position right away. If my partner is backing up a little bit and I go to him, I have to travel to here. If he continues to back up, I still come up into good position here so that I'm in good position.
Here's an example of an inside penetration step on this double leg takedown. Again at normal speed. Here's another example with world and Olympic champion Kevin Jackson of the United States. As he changes to a right leg forward staggered stance, he drops in on this inside penetration step for his double leg. As he comes back up, he immediately has to drive forward again to pursue his opponent for the takedown. Again at normal speed.
The second type of penetration step is an outside step. Keep in mind, for me to use an outside step, my opponent has to be coming towards me or leaning on me. And here's the reason I don't use an outside step for all my techniques. If he's stationary or moving back, and say I'm in a double bicep tie-up right here, and I wanted to hit a duck under or maybe a high crotch, and I tried to outside step here. From this position right here, if he were to continue to move away and snap me down, I'll end up in this position. That's not good position. As you can see, it makes it real easy for him to post me. But watch what happens if I push on him a little bit and I get him to lean into me and I hit my duck under. If I'm pushing on him and he's leaning at all, when I outside step here, his momentum, his penetration actually comes to me. And that's the motion that I have to have. If he's stationary and moving away, I inside step because I have to get to him. But if I'm in a square stance and I want to use an outside step, I have to have motion into me. He's either got to be pushing into me or he's got to be leaning on me. Again, if I outside step and he's moving away from me, this is the situation that occurs. Wrestler gets out of position, he's easily snapped down and easily scored on. So when you teach your wrestlers these two basic skills, remember, on the penetration, you pound, step, drive, that's an inside step. But if I want to use an outside step, which is a great step, make sure that your opponent's coming into you.
World champion and Olympic medalist Chris Campbell uses an outside step to set up this head inside single. Again at normal speed. From elbow control, with his opponent moving into him as he begins to lean, Chris uses an outside step to set up this duck under. Again at normal speed. Here we see a single again set up with an outside step. Again at normal speed.
The third type of penetration is an outside step with a knee spin. And the reason I add this in here into the penetration step is real important. Very simply, I have a basic rule that I learned from another coach at one time that says, backside is best. And very simply, all it means is this. If I'm in front of my opponent here, and even if I'm in good position, and I feel pretty comfortable here, he's got a lot of counters. He can sprawl, he can whizzer, he's got some hooks, he's got some trips, a lot of different techniques that he can do. That if I'm behind him, right here, now he's got some counters he can do, but far less than what he can do if I stay in front. So the basic concept of backside is best. But for me to get to the backside, I have to work on that step. And I call that step a knee spin. And very simply, all I'm going to do is this. It's an outside step. And if I outside step, what's my opponent have to do? He has to lean on me, or he has to be pushing into me. Right? So when I outside step and I do this knee spin, it's an outside step. Here. When I do that, my knee is going to go down in front and spins till I go to the backside. So with no partner, it's like this. I'm going to outside step, knee's going to go down, and I'm going to turn to the backside. Again. The other way, it's an outside step, knee's going to go down, and I'm going to turn here, in this position. So that if I'm facing the other way, outside step, turn, and go to the backside.
We're going to look at a variety of single leg takedowns with Tim Vanny and Joe Gonzalez utilizing this outside step knee spin technique. Notice in all cases the individual is either leaning into them or moving into them as they execute this technique.
Those are three basic penetration steps. All three are used in a different area. I really believe that it's critical that you teach your wrestlers to use all three of those penetration steps and to learn and understand why they do them. That's the whole basis for this videotape series, to educate your wrestlers on why you do what you do. There is a fourth type of penetration step where your opponent brings his hips to you, and we call that a double knee drop. Actually, there's no step involved. What it amounts to is your opponent pushing on you very hard and you dropping to both knees. Those are the type of penetration steps that get your hips close to your opponent's hips.
In this example, John Smith uses a double knee drop type of penetration on this opposite side duck to a high crotch takedown. Again at normal speed. Here we have the same double knee drop penetration on this duck to a high crotch, viewed from another angle. Again at normal speed. Olympic and world champion Arsen Fedzayev of Russia has secured a front headlock on his opponent. From this position, he uses a double knee drop penetration to secure a high crotch, and from there, with a great deal of patience, secures a finish.
Okay, now that we've gone over 4 of the basic skills, we're going to start on number 5, which is lifting. Remember that you stayed in good position, you had some motion, you changed levels, and you penetrated. You got to your opponent. Once you get to your opponent, you're going to have to be able to lift your opponent or cut the angle and take him down, or what I call making an L. So with your partner, the key ingredient here, I'm going to put all these steps together. I'm in good position. My opponent's in good position. He's in a good stance. From this position, I'm going to create a little motion where I'm going to just take a half a step back to get him to lean towards me. It puts me in my drop step position. From there, I'm now going to change levels and penetrate. From this position here, boom, once I get here, from here, now I'm going to come up to a good position so that if he backs away from me completely, I'm in a good stance here. So when he comes back in, from this position right here, my hips and legs are going to lift my opponent right here. I'm going to do a little hip pop and lift my opponent. This makes it very easy for me to lift my opponent. When I get to this position here, where I penetrated and this foot came up, I'm in very tight to my opponent here. I'm in tight, and it's real easy for me to lift my opponent. If his hips are away from me, here, and he were to back away from this position, I'm not in very good position here. And if I'm not in good position, I'm not going to be able to lift my opponent. So, when I get back in here, I come in, I'm in a good stance right here. It makes it very easy for me to lift my opponent. Now, the other part of this, I call making an L. So I don't have to lift my opponent and work real hard. I'm going to cut an angle. And when I talked about penetration, where I did a pound step, and I'm driving, knee touches glass, comes up, now I'm turning 90-degree angle and changing direction to take my opponent down. We call this a flare. And I'm going to flare my opponent, block his knee. It's still a lift, but it's more of a block. Key ingredients to this. 1, when I get to my opponent, I pound, step, drive, legs done. All it's going to do, this toe has to point 90-degree angle across here. From there, this hand's going to block the knee, and now I'm going to step this direction to here. And then I would actually be lifting, right? We call that a flare. But here's a key ingredient. When I do my inside step, and I get to my opponent here, this foot, when I come up, does not stay between the legs. Because for me to walk now, watch his hips just continue to turn. And you end up in this. Instead, you want a 90-degree turn, block the knee. Now watch if he tries to back out, he's still going to go down in this position. All right? So, from here, pound, step, drive, immediately, 90 degrees, blocking the knee, and taking your opponent.
In this example of a lift, Zeke Jones drops into high crotch position, secures the leg tight to his chest. He then executes a hip pop, driving his opponent up and down to the mat across his shoulders. Begin at normal speed. Here we see Ken Melchiori in on a double leg on Kendall Cross. He picks him up, and elevates him, keeping him off the mat. And here he executes a back arch throw to secure back points and the takedown. Again at normal speed. In this example, we see Tim Vanny shooting in on a head inside single using a low-level flare to take his opponent to the mat. Once again at normal speed.
Okay, the sixth skill we're going to cover today is a sprawl. I believe this is very critical because I like to use or coach what I call counter offense. And before you can counter offense, you have to be able to sprawl. It's a basic skill. Here's the basic ingredients of a sprawl. First of all, when I sprawl, I want my hips to go straight down. I don't want to. And other coaches disagree with this, but I don't want to bump my opponent. And the reason for that is, anytime I do this, my hips come up. That's the first thing. Second, I don't want to kick my legs up in the air. I don't want to kick them up here. Because when I do that, my hips come up again. Anytime my hips come up, it allows my opponent an opportunity to get underneath me. What I'd really like to do when I'm in good position here and somebody shoots on me, I'm going to take my hips straight down. Here. Straight down. From that position, for example, if my opponent were to shoot at this leg, it goes back here and my hips go straight down. From this position, I've got a straight leg that he shot at and a bent leg. Because I talk counter offense, not defense, a big difference. From this position right here, I'm now going to circle up to the bent leg to get behind my opponent. To demonstrate this a little bit, I use my partner again, and watch what happens. He's going to shoot on me, and I'm going to kick my legs back. And he's just shooting a double leg. Shoot. Here, in this position. Anytime I'm here, he can raise me up, get me off the mat. Right? The second part of this time he shoots, and he's in this position here, he shoots on me, and I try to bump him. But watch what happens if he lifts, when I bump here, he'll lift me up. And that's not the situation I'm looking for. What I want to be able to do, when he shoots, I want to be able to drop my hips straight down. Here. Straight down. From this position, I don't want to circle to the straight leg. And here's the reason for that. He shoots, and I've sprawled in this position here. I've got a bent leg on this side, straight leg on this side. He's got a hold of this leg. If I try to circle this way, his head will pop out and cut me down. Like a cut across. But from this position right here, from the bent leg, I am able to get a wide arc and circle this way to get behind my opponent. So, with no partner again, you have to understand when you do this drill that it's instilled in your wrestlers that when you sprawl, your hips go straight down. Once they go straight down, you immediately circle to the bent leg side. So you score on your opponent. So that if somebody was shooting on this leg, this leg's going to go straight here. I'm in this position. I would now circle in this direction. Right? If he shoots on this leg goes back, this leg's bent, and I circle this way. Right? That takes care of the sprawl.
We can see the mechanics of this sprawling action here as John Smith shoots in on a high crotch. His North Korean opponent immediately straightens his leg back in a sprawling action, circling to the bent leg. In this example, his North Korean opponent shoots in. John immediately drops his hips to the mat and keeps his hips low and to the mat until he's able to settle into a front body lock position where he can begin a counter offense.
The seventh basic skill that we're going to work on today is a back step. And there's a couple things that are real important in our next two basic skills. And as a coach, you have to be able to understand this. The reason you really teach a back step and a back arch, which are our two next basic skills, is to always give your wrestler an opportunity to win. And what I mean is this, very simply. If the score is 5-0, and there's 30 seconds left in the match, and your wrestler hasn't been able to take your opponent down, he doesn't just quit because he can't take him down. You have to give your wrestler an opportunity to throw your opponent. And to throw your opponent, you have to be able to do a back step, or you have to be able to do a back arch. One of those two basic skills. And that's the main reason for teaching a back step. Although a back step comes into play, you know, when you run the pipe, or you do some other little basic skills, right? Some other techniques. So, back step, very simply, this is what I want you to think about. A back step, what I want to do in a back step is take my hips, put them underneath my opponent's hips to lift him and use his momentum to throw him. So I need to turn 180 degrees. When I talk about a back step, it's a step. This toe goes to my heel. I'm going to turn 180 degrees and change levels in this direction. So that I take my hips, put them underneath my opponent's hips, and from there I would explode and take him forward. But the basic back step is to get the feet right. I don't want my feet, when I do this, to extend more than 4 or 5 inches here. This is not too bad here. But you don't want this type of step where you're trying to turn, because I can't turn 180 degrees. To show you what I'm talking about, and we're not into technique here, all I want you to be able to do is get the back step down. If he's touching me, I do a forearm hook here, I do a little step here, and I'm going to put my hips underneath my opponent's hips. So I'm going to go right here. Now, from this position right here, this gives me the ability to throw my opponent here. It makes it very easy. Several different techniques that you can use from there. Head and arm, hip toss, but you have to be able to do the basic skill of a back step.
In this example, we see Bill Shearer step, back step, and pivot directly to his knees as he executes an arm throw. Here's a variation of this arm throw with Dave Schultz. Notice that he almost pivots directly to the knees.
The next basic skill we're going to talk about is a back arch. And that's scary for a lot of people. But it shouldn't be. You should be able to do it in steps. Very simply, what I'm going to do with a back arch is the same thing I do with a back step, only I'm going to take my hips from the front, put them underneath my opponent's, lift his hips with my hips, and take him into a back arch. Now this would scare me too if I just started with a back arch up here. So I teach this in basic steps. And I use a partner to do this. I'm going to take both his hands here. 1, he's going to step right between my legs, a little step. 2, he's now going to change levels where he's squatting down a little bit. Now, from there, that's not very far to go. From now, he's going to back arch, hit his arch, and I'm going to help him down, and then he's going to turn out of it. Right? That's what we're talking about when we're talking about a back arch. I'm going to take my hips underneath my opponent's hips, lock, and throw. And I'm going to do that now, and watch how easy this really is. I'm in a body lock position. From here, 1, I'm going to step. 2, I'm changing levels. 3, I'm back arching.
Here we have an example of this back arch skill in this belly-to-belly throw with Nate Carr against his Cuban opponent. Here we have an example of this same back arch skill, but this time in a belly-to-back position with John Smith against Stepan Sarkisian of Russia, the Olympic silver medalist in 1988.
The next basic skill that we're going to cover is grips. And very simply, I'll just show the grips so you understand them, and then when we do the drills, we'll talk about why and in what positions we use them. So when we get into the technique portion of this videotape, you'll understand, and we'll talk about what grips to use. The first grip I want to talk about is a knuckle grip. And that's very simply my hands coming together just like this, thumbs are in, and I lock my hands like that in this position. And at various times, you'll switch your hands. From one time it'll be on top if I'm around the leg. The next time, if I'm around the other leg, it may be in this position. Right? But that's called a knuckle grip. The next grip is called a hand clasp, where my thumbs are together, my palms fit like this, and I just fold them over and grip. This is probably the strongest grip there is, especially when you're around the leg and you have the weight pushing down here. Right? The next lock we'd call a butterfly lock, where I'm in this position and this position. You see this a lot in freestyle and Greco-Roman wrestling when you're going to attack a gut wrench position. From this position, I'm able to slide my hands up or down in this. But that's called a butterfly lock, just locking around like that. The next lock we're going to talk about is a forearm hook. And very simply, it's like this. I'm just hooking it. My thumbs are in, I'm hooking here, and from there, I can pinch my elbows and pull. But those are the grips that we're going to talk about while we use this videotape or video series. But what you have to think about is when we get into the technique portion, we'll be able to tell you when to use a knuckle grip, when to use a hand clasp, when to use a forearm hook, or when to use a butterfly grip. When we talk about the basic skill of contact, we're actually talking about tie-ups, or what I call control points. A basic thing to remember about when you tie up with your opponent is to always have inside position. Inside position is superior for both offensive techniques and defensive techniques. The first contact we're going to do is a head tie. When I come to my opponent here and I'm going to go ahead and do a head tie, I don't really want to reach from this angle here because I've created too much space here. If we go back to the simplest thing and we talk about position, this is not good position. My head is up, my back is straight, my elbow's in over here, but this elbow is not in, and it gives my opponent an opportunity to score. So, when I do a contact, when I'm making contact, I stay in good position, move to my opponent in this direction. Now, when I close the gap here, I'm in good position, and now I secure the head tie. But notice I stayed in good position when I moved in here. And now I'm not extending my arm, I just simply grab. When I do a head tie, this hand is staying open. Maybe I want to do a shock to here, or maybe I want to do a high crotch, or I'm going to hit a single leg. But a head tie up, in this position, my elbow's in tight, I get in the head, my elbow pinches to the inside. I don't want him controlling it. My hand, thumb is in, I cut behind the head here, so that I'm in this position here. My elbow's in tight, I've got his head right here. I'm pulling him in here tight. All right? This hand is free. This contact position is called a head tie.
Here's an example of this head tie contact position with Bruce Baumgartner.
Next contact position we're going to do is out of a head tie, but we're going to do a head and bicep tie-up. Remember, I'm going to stay in good position. I'm going to close the gap on my opponent, and I'm going to reach. As I reach, my feet move, so I'm closing the gap. From there, my elbow's going to pinch inside, and all good wrestlers will do just what Joe's done. He's going to try to control my elbow. From this position right here, I'm going to tie up both hands now and do a head and bicep tie-up, where I'm going to take him right here, at the bicep, actually just below it. I'm going to use this hook right here to block him off and control him right here. So that if he were to try to shoot a high crotch here, I have this arm blocked off. At the same time, I'm able to move him this way, or I'm able to move him back across this way. But I'm in pretty good position here by blocking this off. Some people like to take the head and bicep tie-up in this position here. I don't like it as well because it opens up his high crotch and he has freedom to move that arm. So anytime you do a head and bicep tie-up, in this position right here, I like to use the hook right here so that I'm pushing this in or I'm pulling it out. Pushing it and pulling. Keeping his head in here tight, just like a regular head tie, only now I have the bicep. As I come in here, I am now going to hook again and take my opponent's elbows right here. It makes it very difficult when I'm in a one bicep tie-up or two bicep tie-up for my opponent to penetrate on me. That's very important for keeping the hook. When I'm in this position, whether I have one hand or two, I want to block him off and keep him from having an arm free so that he can penetrate. Remember, I don't really want to hook on the outside when I hook the bicep here because it gives him an opportunity to penetrate. If I'm hooking here and I'm controlling this bicep in this position with my hook, it's very hard for him to shoot or do anything with this arm. I'm controlling it by pushing it in here. My elbows are in. I have very little space in here. I'm able to pass it by and go into some various techniques from there. Okay, the tie-up we're going to work on now after we make contact. I want my opponent to make contact with me. So I'm going to stay in good position, and I'm going to walk into my opponent. And 99 out of 100 times when I walk into my opponent, he's going to put hands on me. When he puts hands on me, I'm then going to control his elbow and go to an elbow tie-up. I can control one elbow or two elbows, depending on how many hands he puts on me. But from this position right here, remember, always staying in good position. I close the gap on my opponent. When he touches me, I immediately control the elbow here. Now here's the key to an elbow tie-up. I'm still got a hook here. I'm just above the elbow, and I'm actually going to pinch it a little bit here. As I do this, from this position right here, if he's not comfortable, he'll try to back out, and I have to go with him to control the elbow tie-up. Because what I want to do is not allow this position to get away now. If he tries to pull this away, then I'm going to follow it. But we'll talk about specific techniques later. But what I want to be able to do is keep this elbow bent. I want to control it here. And I want to keep this bend in the elbow so that if he tries to pull away or push into me, I'm closing the gap here, but I don't allow any space here to allow him to come back to this side. What I want to be able to do is keep the elbow. If he puts two hands on me or blocks me off in this manner, I'm now going to take both elbows from here. The way he's blocking off with his thumbs is what he should be doing, but I'm going to roll this, pop those off in this position right here, and now I'm going to have double elbow control right here. Again, I stay in good position here. Once I get a hook here, and I'm pinching this a little bit, he's going to have a difficult time backing up. I just go with him. If he pushes into me at all, it makes it real easy for me to get underneath him. Feel real good about an elbow tie-up. When you learn how to control those elbows, you'll be in a position to score a lot of takedowns. The next contact position we're going to talk about is a 2-on-1. And although there's several different ways to get into the position of the 2-on-1, we'll only cover a couple different situations here. But what we'll talk about is the basic contact, what you do after you have a 2-on-1 and why you have it. First of all, if I walk to my opponent and he puts a hand on me and he ties up my head here, I am very simply, I stayed in good position here. I go to my elbow control right here, where I'm pinching this. Now, this hand crosses over, and he's got a pretty good hook on my head. So what I'm going to have to do here, I'm going to look away from my opponent, create a little space, and take this off. Now watch what I do when I hit this position right here. I've cleared this position off, but I actually want to turn this wrist a little bit. I don't just keep it square. If I do this, and we'll work this technique later, but he can hit a single leg back to this side very easy. I've actually directed him down there, right? So when I clear this off, what I want to do when he's in this position, I control the elbow, I look away, I turn this a little bit in this direction so it's bent. Now, once I'm in a 2-on-1 position, a couple different ways to hook it up. One, bring it tight to your body. And it resists me a little bit on this. From this position right here, what I want to do is get pressure down with my 2-on-1 in this position. At the same time, I have this thing turned. It takes away a lot of the things that he can do to counter it. But I'm in here tight. I'm in good position. I like to keep my head close to his head here in this position. But don't just keep it here. There's two things that you would do here. One, when I get this tie up, I get weight down in this direction or up in this direction. But when I get the tie up, I hook just like this, and I'm turning the wrist. The other thing to do off the 2-on-1, and another real simple setup is this. If I want a 2-on-1, oftentimes I'll leave this hand out here just like this, and they'll grab it. As soon as they grab it, I'm bringing it across, coming right into my 2-on-1. Right? Again, I just go here, catching his wrist. And when I do this, and I bring it across here, I immediately close the gap. This time I'm going to come over the top and hook my own wrist here for 2-on-1. Again, I'm not getting this 2-on-1 just to hang on to it. When I get to this position, my weight is down here. I want weight coming forward so I can go into some of the various techniques. We'll go into some techniques on a later video. But the contact and the tie-up off the 2-on-1, great position to be in, because there's not a lot of techniques he can do out of that position, but there's a lot of things that I can do. So anytime you can secure a 2-on-1, you're in great shape. Okay, the next tie-up we're going to go into is an underhook position. This is another tie-up that really gives you a position of advantage. And that's what we're always looking for in wrestling, is a position of advantage. In this situation, and there's a lot of different ways you can end up in an underhook also. Your opponent can shoot on you. You can block him and come to an underhook. But if I want to take charge and get an underhook, a couple different ways to do it. One, I'm just going to take I'm going to go to a head tie-up. I'm in good position here. As soon as I get his head right here, I'm going to pull it this direction. When I do that, I'm then going to shoot my arm on this side. As I do this, I stay in good position. I'm down in here, I'm in good position, and I shoot my underhook here. Now, when I get an underhook, and I'll do it from this side, I want my hand up over the top. And I want this elbow to control his elbow in this position. I don't want him to be able to get this elbow down. For example, if he has an underhook on me, and I'm able to get this elbow back here and down, I can still hit a lot of different techniques here. So when you get in this position right here, I'm up over the top, this elbow, think in terms of controlling this elbow. And I'm in this position. My head is in tight, and now I'm controlling this, and I can move him around. I'm in good position. One underhook. But the second this elbow gets a little low, it really puts a lot of pressure on me. I have to carry his weight. So when you get in this position, get that elbow up, over the arm, and a lot of different techniques you can attack here. And we'll go into those different techniques later. A real position of advantage is a variation off an underhook where you get a double underhook, and you're in great position. So if I have an underhook right here, and I'm going to work my head into this position and maybe circle him around a little bit and come up into this position where I'm in a double underhook. And this is very important with the double underhook. I want to get him up, and immediately what I want to do is change directions and get him going backwards. From this position right here, I'm in pretty good shape to score. I can inside trip, I can high dive, but from this position here of a double underhook, I want to take his elbows up here. Now, if he tries to bring his elbows down, it's too late, and I'm in good position to body lock, to trip, to double leg. A lot of different techniques that I can do in that position. But when I'm in this underhook position and I'm going to fight for two, I'm going to clear my head to this side here and come up here. From this position, you have to be careful, and immediately I want my weight taking him backwards. If I don't, if I stay in here, he can inside trip me in this position. Take me down, right? So it's very important, once you get this position, to get his weight back this way. You see what I've done? I've taken away his inside trip, some different techniques he can do. So when I get this position here, I change the direction, good contact, good tie-up, good position, but I want his weight backwards, this way. The next contact we're going to do is wrist tie-ups. Another great position to be in, and oftentimes, especially European countries, are great at hand fighting and controlling the wrists. And as a wrestler, as you progress up through the years, make sure that you control the wrists in the correct position. And when I say the correct position, this is what I mean. Anytime I want wrist control and he's in good position here, I do not want to grab his wrists like this, whether it's one or it's two. And the reason is this. If I grab him from the outside in here, he's able to penetrate on me, and it's very difficult for me to stop him. If I grab one, he can penetrate to this side. If I grab both, he can go to both legs. So I don't want to grab the wrist from the outside. But wrist control is very important. So when I do contact and tie-up, I do wrist control from the inside out. Watch what happens now when I grab his wrist. I'm going to grab his wrist here in this position and turn it a little bit. But now, if he tries to penetrate on me or come on me, I have an arm between him and me. At the same time, and I'll go to a double wrist tie-up here, watch the position that it puts me in. This time when I grab his wrist and I turn him a little bit, he's uncomfortable with this, and oftentimes they'll try to pull him back. When they do, it allows me an opening to get to my opponent. So anytime you do wrist control, make sure you come from the inside out rather than the outside in, right? If he ties my head and I want a wrist control, I'm going to turn it, and take it in this position, right here. And when we get into the technique, you'll understand why I do this position. If he pulls this back, I just penetrate to here. If he stays in that position right there and makes it difficult and starts to back out a little bit, I then attack the opposite side. But wrist control is a great position to be in as long as you're inside-out control. the one thing you have to be aware of in wrist control is arm drags, right? Thought I'd better cover this now. We'll get into it in our technique and countering and clearing wrist tie-ups, but very important, if I do this right here and I leave too much room for him to hit an arm drag here, it opens him up. So anytime I do contact or wrist tie-ups, watch the position of my head. Here. If I'm controlling this side right here, my head will stop him from getting over here to drag. And at the same time, it opens up possibilities for me. So anytime you do wrist tie-ups, control, make sure you stay in good position and you're conscious of your head. Keep it in the right position so your opponent can't arm drag you. But wrist control is another great tie-up. Next contact or tie-up we're going to do is a forearm hook. And keep in mind, this is a freestyle and a folk style syllabus, and some of the techniques, when we get into them, we'll talk about what are high percentage moves and what are not high percentage moves. But in freestyle, the scoring's a little bit different and the risk taking is a little bit different. For example, in freestyle, if I try a throw or a shoulder throw or a head and arm and I slip down to the mat and he falls on top of me, he doesn't get any points because it's called a slip throw. But the next tie-up is very important for this aspect of it, and we call this a forearm hook. And very simply, I'm going to walk into my opponent, and when he puts hands on me, I'm immediately going to go to a forearm hook. And here's the situation. I walk to my opponent. When he touches me, I immediately go to a forearm hook. I'm just coming over the top of his forearm, and I'm trapping it right here in this position. And this is really difficult for him to create space here. When he starts to pull away, it gives me the opportunity to hit. If I walk in and he ties up the other side here, the forearm hook is over the top. Or an underarm spin, some various techniques, but it's real simple. So when I get in this position, he ties up, this comes over the top. Immediately, I pinch it. I'm going to pinch the back of his head, or back of his hand with my head. At the same time, I'm going to hook his forearm in this position here. I want to get a hold of this forearm so it's difficult for him to get it out here. As a matter of fact, the only avenue of escape he really has is by taking his hand down there. If I want to trap it more in the forearm hook, this is what I do. I just grab it. From this position right here, now this is really hard for him to get this released. In this position, right? And that allows me my throw position. So the forearm hook, I'm coming over the top, hook, trapping his hand with my head, pulling it. If he's trying to pull it down, and you'll be able to feel that right away, you also have the option to come in on this side and trap his elbow. Right? The next basic skill we're going to talk about is a setup. The object of a setup is to get your opponent out of position or move him so you can create an angle to use your technique. It's a very basic skill, but one that needs to be worked on a regular basis. The first setup I'm going to talk about is a pop. And to get a pop, all I'm going to do is walk to my opponent. And oftentimes, opponents block with straight arms. They like to keep a distance with you. And anytime that occurs, a pop is open to you. Very simply this. I'm walking to my opponent, but he uses straight arms. Notice that his elbows are straight here. Anytime you get in this position, this is very difficult for me to just penetrate. It's hard for me to get by this man. So in this position right here on my setup, I'm going to lean on him a little bit so he has to get a little pressure back on me. From here, I'm going to pop the elbows up. As I do that, I'm going to pop here, and I'm actually blocking it rather than trying to pop it high so I can get underneath him here. But that's what we mean by a pop setup.
As red reaches with straight arms, blue uses a pop setup as he drops steps and changes elevation into this double leg takedown. Once he has secured his opponent's hips and legs, he lifts and from this position dumps back for a finish. Again, at normal speed. As his opponent reaches, Bill Scheer pops his arm up and inside steps to a high crotch position. Once there, he changes elevation again, driving his opponent up as he changes across to a double to finish. Again at real speed. With a forearm hook on one side, blue pops the other arm and drop steps to a double leg. He then lifts, this time locking blue's elbow, and dumps him back into a back arch throw to finish.
The next setup we're going to do is a chop. And it really goes in the same type of situation that you would use a pop with, except you're way better off in this situation. Watch what happens this time when I walk into my opponent and he puts both hands on me or one hand on me. But this time he's got a little bend in it. He's closed the gap a little bit. He doesn't have straight arms. Anytime he's in this position here and I walk in and there's a bend in his arm here, it's real hard for me to pop this. I'd have to hit it just right, get above his elbows, and that's very difficult to do. So rather than trying to pop up this time, I'm going to hook over the top this way because he has bent arms. I'm going to take a little step backwards and I'm going to chop in this position. All right? You have to understand the difference in these two situations. The straight arms, I want to pop them up. As a matter of fact, if he comes straight arms on me and I try to chop that, he has so much distance in his arms, he'll get his arms back to block you before you'll ever get to him. In this position, if he's straight arms here and I try to chop, he'll get his arms back into good position there, and I haven't accomplished anything but to get his arms off. But if we're in this position and he's bent armed, now watch what happens. Anytime I do a little chop here, I really get a snap. There's a bend in the arms. It's going to take his momentum forward. So anytime I do a setup and he's got bent arms, I want to chop that down. As I chop on my setup, my hands come back inside in this position here. So that if he were to attack, and oftentimes this is a good way, and we'll talk about this when we get into technique, when I chop him, if he were to follow me and I didn't keep my hands inside, he'd be in good shape, whether it's one hand or two. But if I chop here and don't keep my hand inside, he can penetrate on me. So anytime you're using a chop in this position here, take your hands, leave them inside.
Here we see an example of this chop setup as Red uses a quick downward blow with his hands to snap blue to the mat. Once again at normal speed. Barry Davis uses this chop setup not once, but several times in order to set up this near side cradle. Again.
The next setup we're going to talk about is a shuck. And when I talk about a shuck, I'm talking about taking the contact point across my body this time. So I'm going to walk into my opponent. He's going to put a hand on me. I'm immediately going to take a tie-up and control and shuck it across my body. Right? I walk in, the opponent puts hands on me. From this position right here, I could go to an elbow tie-up right here. I can look for a 2-on-1 tie-up. But my objective here on my setup is to clear him and shuck his arm across my body. For example, I'm going to go to a 2-on-1 here. I'm going to take this across my body in this position, immediately to step in here. But from that position, what I've done is a shuck. I can take it again, a little different this time. I walk in, he controls my head here. This time I'm going to shuck him across my body and snag the leg here. So I'm going to turn and step here for a shuck. But that setup's called a shuck, where I'm taking the contact point across my body this time. I could walk in here in this position, take control, and actually take the control point, which is his head this time, and shuck it across my body this way. But that's what we call a shuck setup.
From an elbow tie, Tim Vanny shucks or leads his opponent's elbow across his body to set up this single. He then changes to a double, lifts, and drives through for back exposure and possible fall on the takedown. At normal speed. Here's another example of this shuck setup.
This time the setup that we're going to talk about is an arm drag. And remember, what we're trying to do with setups is create an angle so that I have an opportunity to score by putting my opponent out of position. One way I can do this, very simply, I'm going to reach out and he's going to control my wrist in that position. Oftentimes wrestlers do that. Now I'm going to bring this across my body and I'm going to hit an arm drag, create an angle so that I can penetrate to my opponent and score. Again, I'm talking about arm drags for a setup. And anytime he puts hands on me, and we'll talk about this in the technique session, I'll be able to hit an arm drag on him. If I walk in and he tries to tie my head up here and ties up there, I can now take the control point, which is here. I can take it down, hit an arm drag. As I do that, I've created an angle so that I can set my opponent up so that I can penetrate. I can take the control point to the outside. He ties up, I can take the control point to the outside, hit an arm drag, and penetrate. But when I talk about setups and I talk about arm drags, when we get into the technique portion, you'll notice that all I'm really trying to do is drag the arm across the body. I'm going to bring it across so that I have an opportunity. I've created an angle so that I can penetrate to my opponent. I'm using an arm drag to set my opponent up for various techniques.
World silver medalist Chris Wilson of Canada uses an arm drag to set up this single leg attempt. Here's another example of this arm drag with six-time world champion Valentin Giordano. Notice the patience he uses in executing it against his Japanese opponent.
The next setup we're going to work on is a pummel position. And you do your pummel position out of an over and under tie-up, or that's your control point or your contact point. So when I make contact with my partner, I'm going to walk into this position, go to a bicep tie-up maybe, to an underhook, so that I end up in an over and under position or a pummel position. From here, when I talk about a pummel, what I'm going to do is work this hand back inside here, just like this. This hand's going to come inside. But at the same time, I want my feet to move. Remember the basic concept, when my hands move, my feet move. So when I do this, and I pummel here, I want my feet to change so that I'm controlling the position. As I'm doing this, I'm now thinking about a setup. I'm pummeling for a setup. I'm not just pummeling for position, I'm pummeling to set my opponent up for different techniques. There's a lot of different techniques you can do. But understand the pummel, why you're doing it, and how you're setting your opponent up. So from this position, as I'm pummeling and I'm moving my feet, I'm concentrating on setting my opponent up. So the next time I come over the top and I come here, I can go to a shoulder throw. I'm pummeling here. I can pummel to a duck. But I'm using the pummel position out of an over and under to set my opponent up, to create an angle or a situation that gives me the opportunity to score. Using the pummel, inside, elbows in, moving my feet. Feet move, hands move, your feet move, and I'm going to use that for a setup.
World silver medalist Jim Shear pummels to secure a double underhook on his German opponent. He then pivots and foot sweeps for back exposure on the takedown. Again at normal speed.
The next setup we're going to talk about is any fake or fint. Anything that I do to get a reaction out of my partner is actually a setup. If I was real quick and I didn't have a control point, what I would try to do is fake my opponent, get him to put weight on one foot or the other foot, so that allows me an opening or an angle to score. And when I talk about any fake, I'm talking about not making contact now, but I'm in this position, and any fake just to get a reaction out of my opponent to get him to step or to get him to move. So any fake or fint, but remember, anytime I do this, I stay in good position. That's the key to everything. Remember the basic skills. If I'm going to move my hands in here, my feet move right here. But I'm constantly moving and faking in this position here. Any fake or fint is a type of setup that can get your partner to put weight on one foot or the other and give you an angle of attack.
John Smith uses this fake or fence setup to secure this low single. He then changes to a double to finish. Let's look at several other examples of this setup on John Smith's low single. Zeke Jones fakes to the head, then outside steps to secure this single leg takedown.
Okay, the last setup that we're going to work on is what we call a post. And very simply, by a post, what I'm talking about doing is putting my opponent in a position, the point of control or the access point in a post where it's solid, it's not able to move. For example, if I walk to my opponent, he head ties me, and I'm going to clear to a 2-on-1, I want you to look at what I would post on this situation. I walk in, he controls, I go to a 2-on-1. From this position right here, I've closed the gap, I have good position, but I haven't really set him up yet. All I've done is got a control point. But this time, what I'm going to do is circle him just a little bit, and I'm going to get him to post this leg. Very simply, when I get him in a position to post, he's going to take a step with it. There. I'm going to put the weight on it, and now I've posted it in this position right here. When I'm talking about a post for a setup, I want my opponent in a position where this is solid, just like a post. A telephone pole is a post, so that now he can't pick that up. That's a post. That allows me to do an ankle pick or another type of setup. Another post that we might be talking about for a setup, I'm going to walk in and get head control here. When he gets a little motion back into me, I'm going to snap him down to his hands and post his hands on the mat. From there, then I can go into my drag or my various techniques. Understand, when you watch these tapes and you watch these basic skills and these setups, well, I try not to do any of the technique. You have to understand the concept of what contact is, what the control point is, what a setup is, before we can ever get to the technique portion. Once you get to where you can understand those situations, those basic skills, then I think getting your takedowns and doing your technique will become a lot easier.
World and Olympic champion Larry Habeloff of Russia uses a 2-on-1 to post his opponent's hand to the mat. He then blocks behind the armpit and circles behind for the takedown. At normal speed, Zeke Jones chops down on his opponent's head to secure a front headlock, which he uses to post his opponent's leg to set up this ankle pick takedown. Again, at normal speed. Royce Alger chops his opponent's forearms to post him to the mat, where he then uses a short arm drag to go behind. Once again at normal speed. From a head-tie position, Chris Wilson drives his opponent's head over his foot to post his leg in order to secure this ankle pick takedown.
The 12th skill we're going to work on today, the basic skill, is a hip heist. The first 11 skills dealt with being on your feet more. But when we close out here, the next skills we talk about are going to be down on the mat. A hip heist is one of the most important skills to understand in wrestling. And there's a couple different hip heists. If I'm trying to get away from my opponent, the first hip heist is I'm going to try to get my hips as far away from my opponent as I can, because I have to do that to get away from him. The other type of hip heist is out of a bridge, for example, where I'm up in a bridge and I need to flip my hips so that I turn my hips from facing the ceiling down towards the mat. For example, the first hip heist, if I'm trying to get away from my opponent, here's what I'm going to try to do. I'm going to create an angle with my hands, get my hips out, and I'm going to start them away from my opponent here in this situation. But look where I am in comparison to this circle and where I'm going to finish. When I get into this position right here, what I want to do is still get my hips as far away from my opponent as I can so he can't snap me down or get back behind me. So I'm going to straighten this leg. And when I do that, when I straighten this leg right here, it's going to create a little distance. And watch what happens with my hips when I flip them. Now, from this position right here, I'm in a sprawl position. I'm facing my opponent, and I'm going to circle up. So if you have a partner on you, and you're in a referee's position here, and he's on top of me, I'm going to do a hip heist where I'm going to create space and distance from my opponent. I'm going to create an angle, coming out to the top. I'm going to clear my hips here. But once I get to this position right here, I want to get a little further away. So this leg straightens here. I'm creating distance. I turn to the outside, and now I've created a lot of space between me and my opponent. But another type of hip heist is going to take me where I just flip my hips. And an example would be like this. If I'm in on a low single leg, and I duck between his legs. You see this situation a lot now since John Smith has really revolutionized the low single leg takedown. But in this position right here, where you have your opponent up, and now I'm going to set him down here, in this position. For me to do a hip heist now, I don't want my hips to go away from my opponent. All I want to do is flip my hips towards his head here. That's another form of a hip heist. Both times, I'm taking my hips from facing up to flipping them so that they're facing down. Again, another situation to be able to do that without a partner is a simple bridge. If I'm in a back bridge here and I want to get off my back, I have to be able to cut my legs under and hip heist. So a hip heist, the simplest and basic skill, is taking your hips and flipping them. But you have to understand the difference of when you want to get your hips away from your opponent or when you want to just flip your hips and stay in the same position.
Here's an example of this hip heist skill as it's used to execute an escape from parterre position for 1 point. Again at normal speed.
Now we're going to talk about offensive takedowns and finishes. We've tried to concentrate on the offensive takedowns and finishes that occur at all age levels and are most effective. Keep in mind as you watch the video that if one of the finishes doesn't work, you immediately go to the second one. We've tried to create a situation where you have 3 finishes in a row, one setting up the other. As we start our takedown technique, there's 3 important principles that I want you to think about and watch as we go through this technique. First of all, I want to talk about the control points. And when I talk about control points, I'm talking about anytime I get a hold of a wrist or an elbow or a head, whatever it is that I make contact with my opponent, that's the control point. And there's only 4 ways to take that control point. I can take it down, I can take it to the outside, I can take it over the top of my head, or I can take it across my body. The second principle I want to talk about is where to step. When you have your opponent, there's only 5 places that I can step on my opponent. If I have my opponent here, I want to step to the outside 2 or 3 inches, to the inside 2 or 3 inches. I step to right between his legs, and I can step to the inside of this foot, right here 2 or 3 inches, or to the outside 2 or 3 inches. Now when I do that by stepping with the outside foot, I can step with the inside foot, I can step between the legs, I can step here, or I can step here. I want to go toe to toe. I don't want to go too deep, and I don't want to go too shallow. So as you watch the technique, I want you to watch the control points, I want you to watch where to step, and the third principle I want to talk about is a half-man theory, where we're talking about creating an angle on our opponent. Anytime I have my opponent here, before I attack him, I'm going to get what we call a half-man theory, where I put his leg right between my legs. I don't want to be square to him here because we're equal. Before I attack, I'm going to either, and there's 2 ways of doing this, I'm going to step here and here to create a half-man theory to attack this leg. Keep in mind, anytime I've created this angle, I've also put him in the same situation in a half-man theory. The second thing to think about, when I take a control point, for example, clearing this across here, when I take this control point this time across my body, I'm going to put this guy in a half-man to me, here. When I've done that, I've now put him half-man to me, right here. I'm going to take the control point this time across my body, and as I do that, now I put his leg halfway between here, and it allows me to step to one of the 5 positions. In this case, I'd step right between the legs. The first technique we're going to work today is a double leg, and we're going to work it in a high-level situation. We're going to work the double leg with 3 different finishes, and why we would go to each of those 3 finishes. Before I start this, I want you to keep in mind there's several different setups, several different ways to get into the situation where you take the double leg, but we're just going to go over one of these right now. I'm going to walk to my opponent. When he posts a hand, I'm going to be real disciplined. When I walk to him, he'll try to stop me with one of his hands. When he does that, that's the first principle I want to be able to talk about, the control point. So as I walk to him, hand comes to me, I'm immediately going to clear this hand off, my control point, right here. I'm going to shuck it off here. At the same time, I'm taking a little step here. Now I've created an angle, my half man, and now I'm going to penetrate to a high-level double leg here, in this position. My hands go right behind the knees here. From this position, I've stepped right between the legs, one of the 5 stepping points. from here, now I'm just going to continue to tackle and drive. Here. And take my opponent down. So the first technique, high-level double leg with a finish. I'm going to walk to my opponent. He's going to post this time. I'm going to clear a control point across my body. Take a half man to the outside. Pound. Step. From here, high-level tackle. I'm going to let go of this because once I've crossed this across my body, my head has now blocked it off and he can't get it back. My hands go right behind the knees. I've stepped right between the legs. High level, double leg, tackle. Now, as I hit, and we'll do one more and do it faster, I'm going to post so I don't get rolled through. I walk to him. He's going to post me off. When he does, I control it off. Step, tackle. That position.
From wrist control, David Zuniga fakes an arm drag and drop steps to this double leg. Notice the control he has as his trail leg comes up and he drives his opponent straight through to the mat. From a non-contact position, Kevin Jackson taps his opponent's head, then a shoulder, and as his opponent comes back in, he penetrates under for the double, driving him straight to the mat. From a non-contact position, Kerry Kolot penetrates straight through his opponent to take him to the mat. Here's another example with Olympic and world champion Young Soon Park of Korea.
The second situation that occurs off a high-level double leg is when he reacts to me and gets his hips back a little bit and doesn't go down. I'll still hit the same double leg, but he'll get his legs back a little bit, so I won't be able to get the tackle. I walk, he touches, clear it off, created my half man, step. When I hit this time, he's backing up. I immediately follow my hips up. I can't allow any room in here. So now this leg's done all it's going to do. It comes up, 90 degree, make the L. Now I'm going to flare my opponent down. Here. This time I walk, control point across my body, put my opponent half man, step, but this time he flares. I drive, post on the outside, block the knee. Now I'm going to flare my opponent. Here.
Here's a good example of this flare finish for the double with Barry Davis. Here's another good example with John Fisher. Even though the ref is in the way part of the time here, pay close attention. It is a good example.
The last takedown we're going to do on a high-level double leg or the last finish, I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to clear the control point, step between the legs, try to tackle it, but to get his legs back. The second thing, I'm going to try to flare, but he's going to get his leg way out and not allow me to get the flare. And that'll open up the third finish for a high-level double leg, which is running the pipe. He's going to post, and come to this position right here, and I'm going to try to knock him down here. But as he doesn't go, I'm going to come up, because my leg comes up quick. I'm trying to make an L, but this leg right here, gets out away from me. Here. and I can't flare it, that allows me, position here where I've hooked, to just back step and set my opponent down. So 1, I try to tackle. 2, I try to flare. If I can't get one of those 2, that means I'll be able to run the pipe. Again, cross, hit, try to flare, can't do it, run the pipe. Right? We'll do it with the other arm this time. I walk, hit, try to flare, can't do it. I'm going to back step, set my opponent down. Let me show you what happens if I clear a high level and I try to run the pipe too soon and he doesn't get a wide base. I walk, clear, here. But if I immediately try to run the pipe without this leg being wide, he'll just hop with me in this position. But it makes it very easy for me to flare.
As Barry Davis starts to run the pipe on this double leg finish, his opponent tries an over-under throw to counter. Barry posts out with both hands to stay on top and get the finish.
Okay, now we're going to work a double leg where we get trapped down on the mat and we can't get up to our feet right away because our opponent has stopped us. And we're going to work some finishes from that. The first technique we're going to work is a lift and flare. So I'm going to walk to my opponent. When he touches me, I clear the control point across and I shoot, but I get trapped right down here in this position. So I'm in a double leg position down on the mat. My trail leg is up, my hips are in tight like they should be, and I'm in this position. I'm coming right behind the knees. From here, I'm just going to change levels a little bit. As you can see, I'm not completely up in the air here. I'm kind of squatted down, but at the same time, I'm in good position. From here, I'm going to raise my opponent up and flare the far knee here. I'm going to lift him up and flare the knee in this position. I'm going to hit a double leg. He's going to stop me here. From this position, my trail leg has come up. I'm going to squat a little bit down here. Then I'm going to raise my opponent up and flare.
Here's an example of this low-level flare with Olympic medalist and world champion Sergei Small of Belarus. As he traps the far knee and lifts his opponent or flares him across, his opponent tries a body lock to counter. He then circles toward the head, threatening back exposure in order to get his opponent to belly out and get the takedown. Here's another example of this low-level flare with world bronze medalist Kirk Trost of the United States.
The second technique I'm going to do from here is if he counters that technique where I lift and I can't reach the far side, right? He touches, I clear, hit my double leg, I'm trapped down here, and he has this leg wide. This time I'm going to step to the outside here, pull right at the knee, and cut him down this way. Going to cut across my opponent. Here, hit. I've been stopped down here. My trail leg is up. I can't flare him here, so I'm going to step up to the outside, pull the far knee, and cut around the corner. Cut across.
Notice the head pressure Kirk Trost uses as he steps up and pulls the far knee to cut across on this double leg finish. Notice how Steve Knight has to re-step to maintain control as he pressures with his head and pulls the far knee. He then steps over both of his opponent's legs to complete the finish. Here's another example of this cut-across finish with Dan Mayo of Foxcatcher.
This time I'm going to take the control point to the outside and then across my body to hit this double leg. Walk in, he touches, clear it to the outside, across my body, I've created an angle, I'm half man, hit my low level double leg right here. From this position, knee to the inside, my trail leg's going to come up because it's done all it can do. It wants to come up quick, and I'm going to trip this outside leg. Here, keep my weight going forward. I'm going to feel that right away. Walk in, he touches, drag, hit, trip, here. As I hit my outside trip, I want to get right behind the heel. I don't want to try to trip too high. In this position here, trail leg comes up immediately. I'm setting it down. My momentum continues forward. And I spread wide so I can't be rolled through. The next trip we're going to do is a little inside trip. And actually this works better on taller opponents. That as you try to lift and flare, you can't get them off the mat. They start to hook around you in a body lock position, and you want to trip inside in this situation. I hit here, with the legs up. I'm trying to lift, but this guy just gets taller on me and taller. So what I'm going to do this time is take my inside knee, switch this knee down, and trip inside here. When you find yourself wrestling a taller opponent, this technique becomes very effective. Low level double leg. Here, I'm trying to lift, but he gets tall and I can't get him up. This knee's already in tight. I put the outside knee down and I just trip inside. Even if he's looking for a body lock, get him around my stomach here and lock. I want to hit inside here. Again, I just set the foot down, trip over it, in this position. Again, I want my arms wide so that he can't roll me through.
This is an excellent example of this outside trip finish for this double leg with Kirk Trost. Booker Bedford uses the same outside trip finish from a higher level. Here we see an inside trip finish on this double from the feet with Greg Olinsky.
The next finish we're going to work off the double leg situation is when your opponent gets wrapped around your waist. I'm going to hit a good double leg. He's going to get good reaction, get his hips back, but at the same time, he's going to block around my waist, and this is the technique that you would use. I walk to my opponent. When he touches, again, I can take the control point down, to the outside, across my body, or over the back. This time I'm going to take my control point down, hit a little drag, hit my double leg. In this position. When I get here, he immediately gets his hips back in this position and wraps around my waist here. The first thing that I need to do is get my hips back underneath me. So I'm actually going to post my hand, slide my inside knee up here in this position. Now, I've gotten my hips in pretty good position where if he were to back away from me now, go ahead and back away. I'm in good, solid position here. That's very important. Don't try to do this technique if you're leaning forward at all. So if he has me extended, I post this hand, slide my inside knee up, so I'm back in good position. He's still around my waist. What I'm going to do here is take this hand, hook his wrist. I don't really want to hook his elbow because he has a tendency to be able to slide it out. If I just do this, he can slide it out. If I grab his wrist and he tries to pull it out, he won't get it out. From this position now, I'm going to take an outside step with this knee here. From there, I'm just rolling over his shoulder that I have trapped. And from this position, I'm going to keep him here, get my points, and then hip hike towards his head. All right, again, I'm in a double leg position here. I'm down here. I immediately, because he sprawled, did a good job. When I get my hips back under me, I post the hand. My inside knee will slide to this position. From there, I'm going to trap the wrist here. I'm going to take a little outside step, put his shoulder down right here. Now I'm in a crab walk position. I don't really want to stay on my butt. From here, I'm coming up, so I'm holding my opponent down here. Another thing that is very important in this technique situation is when I get him down, let's try this, in this position here. He's back, but when I get him back here, I come up on my feet. This hand is posting down. Don't hip heist and turn towards his legs. If I do that, watch his hips and I'll try to chase him. And that's what'll happen. Seen a lot of good takedowns lost in this position right here. Anytime I'm here in this situation, I hip heist towards his head, this way. Now watch and see if he can get away by flipping his hips when I do this. I catch him on his back. Again, do not roll towards his hips or his feet. You'll end up in that position. When you get your opponent in this situation, I'm going to hip heist, basic skill, but I'm going to hip heist towards his head, not towards his hips. Here. From here, now I'm going to bring this hand over the top. This time I'm going to take the control point down again, hit a double leg. Here. I've stopped in this position right here, and this guy is really a tough man and clings on me tough, and at the same time he reaches over with the other hand and grabs one of my ankles. From this position right here, what I'm going to do is set on his hand, right there. I want him to try to pull his hand out. I have all the weight on his hand here. I don't have to reach back and grab this with either hand because I don't want to lose track of these hips. If I were to let go here and try to reach back, grab this, his hips are free now and he can move to the outside and get around me. So I want to make sure that I keep control of his hips. At the same time, he can grab me with both hands on my ankles. It doesn't make any difference. From this position, he's done a good job of countering. I immediately set on one of them. So it's trapped. I don't want to let go of the hips here. I want to keep them. From this position now, again, I'm going to go back in this direction. Here. I'm posted. I'm in a crab walk, hip heist position. One of our basic skills. Again, I don't hip heist towards the hips. I hip heist towards his head. Here. In this position. We'll do it one more time. Partner's coming over. Grabbing my ankles after I've gotten in a double leg position. I immediately set on it. I just set right on it, put all my weight on that hand. I continue the motion back. I'm in a crab walk position here, and I'm going to hip heist towards his head. And as I do this, I want him to try to turn. Ready? Go. I'm going to catch him right here. Got to have those quick hips. You got to work that basic skill on that hip heist every day.
In this variation, Zeke Jones' Romanian opponent is locked in the crotch as Zeke tries to control the arm and dump him back. He immediately hip heists to the head, but his opponent rolls free. Back exposure for Zeke, 0 for his opponent.
We talked about lifting in our basic skills. Lifting can be a very effective finish for a double leg takedown, as can be seen from the following examples. Again, there's a lot of different setups that will get you into the position for the single leg, but the basic thing we're going to work on today is finishes for the single leg. I have a basic concept on a high-level single leg. First of all, once I start my momentum or my direction, I don't want to change that until I've scored. The only time I'll change is if my opponent forces me to change. So the first technique I'm going to do is on a high-level single leg is flare my opponent. One setup and one technique that's real effective is I'm going to walk to my partner, my opponent, and this is real effective later in the match when a guy starts to get a little tired, but I'm going to post this shoulder and attack the opposite leg. I'm going to do that with a straight arm. I don't want this arm bent because I'm a lot stronger when my elbow's locked out. From this position right here, I'm going to post this far shoulder like this, and I'm going to turn his hip here and collect this leg. Notice I'm doing a step in rather than a penetration step. This is just a step in. I'm going to post this, step to this position. From here, I don't want to change directions. I want to continue the momentum going this way and hit my flare here. This is an explosive single leg, and you're going to post the shoulder here. Now, from this position, when I hit my flare, as I continue to walk, I'm going to walk this foot here. I don't want to step inside with this one because it allows your opponent to throw me. All right? So my first step will be with my outside foot, and then I'll step inside my opponent and hit the flare. Post the shoulder, step. Now I'm stepping here to this position, and I'm going to step inside again, catching my opponent here. I don't want to change directions until he makes me change.
As his opponent moves toward him and reaches, Tim Vanny changes elevation to a single and immediately comes back up to this flare finish. Jack Griffin posts his opponent away as he attempts a single, then drops back into a single himself using a flare to finish. Mike Davies shoots in on a double. When his opponent sprawls, pushing his head down and whizzers in, he changes to the single and comes up to a flare finish.
Okay, this time I'm going to hit my flare, but this time he's going to get his leg back, and he's not going to allow me to get to it to flare. I use the same setup, posting the shoulder here, but as I go, he's got this leg way out here, and I can't get it. Immediately, I trap the leg here. I'm going to back step and run the pipe here. Hike the football. So without a partner, I'm going to post here. I can't reach this leg. When I can't reach that leg, it means he has a wide stance. Running the pipe is one of the most basic techniques in wrestling. But especially young wrestlers have trouble running the pipe because they don't understand the concept of a wide stance and a narrow stance. If he's in a narrow stance, in this position right here, notice my hand lock here. It's a hand clasp in this position. My head is up. My back is straight. I'm in good position here. But if this foot's close to my foot and it's a narrow stance, I can try to run the pipe, but with his balance, he'll be able to stay up. You have kids in that situation. But if I try to flare my opponent, reach for this, and it gets wide, where I can't reach it, it creates a base where I'm very easy, step back, and run the pipe. So the first thing I want to do is try to flare. But most of the time, your opponent will understand that, post his foot out, I come back and try to run the pipe.
Notice the spread between his opponent's feet as Jack Kugel runs the pipe for a finish on this single leg.
Now, if you have a real good athlete and you're in that situation and you try to flare and you can't, but he adjusts real quick, brings his foot back in, the third technique and finish I'm going to try to do on a high-level single leg is what we call a flank. So I post, try to flare, can't do it. I try to run the pipe, but he corrects himself quick, brings his foot up in here close. Now, all I'm going to do is change levels. I don't have very long arms, and it's hard for me to reach just above the knee here. I can't reach it. But watch what happens when I change levels a little bit. Now, I'm still in good position. I've reached across here. My shoulder's going to roll into my opponent, and I'm going to come to here, down into this position. Try to flare, try to run the pipe. You can't do that. The flank should be there. Post here, flare, run the pipe. Can't do it. I'm going to change levels here. In this position, I'm right above the knee, rolling my shoulder, and pulling this at the same time.
From wrist control, Olympic and world champion Arsen Fadzayev from Russia drop steps to this single, maintaining a tight control on his opponent's leg and hip. As he turns in the struggle, he finishes with this flanking technique. Here's another example of this flanking finish from a single leg position.
The next technique we're going to use is a heel block off a high-level single leg. I post the shoulder, attack the single leg, try to flare, can't do it, run the pipe, but he adjusts. When he adjusts in this position right here, that brought his foot pretty close. All I have to do now, I'm going to step behind his heel in that position. I'm going to post my foot and actually raise my toes. So my heel is posted, but my toe's up. From that position, I'm just going to lean into my opponent, and he'll fall. A little different angle here. I'm going to post the far shoulder, attack the near leg. This position. Try to flare. He gets his leg way out. Try to run the pipe. He brings it in close. From that position, I block. Notice I post. I've changed the angle. I put all the weight on his far foot. From there, I'm just leaning him forward. There.
Charlie Cheney uses a step to the heel as a finish for this single leg. Mike Van Arsdale uses a sweeping back heel trip to finish this single.
High-level single leg, one of the last finishes that we're going to do, but it's really one of the most effective finishes, is changing from a single leg to a low level, capturing both legs. Now I'm going to post, attack this leg right here, try to flare, I can't do it, try to run the pipe, and that brings his leg close to me when I do that. From this position right here, I'm going to change levels and attack both legs, but I'm going to do it down by the ankle. Make sure you're below the knee on this. From here, now I'm going to change the weight a little bit and lean into my opponent, just a little bit. As I do that, I pinch this. I'm going to pinch his leg and catch here. Do it one more time. Post here, attack, run the pipe. From this position, attack below, wrap both legs, capture them for a high-level finish on a single leg.
Jack Kugel attempts a change-off to 2 from this single leg position, and while he fails to trap below the knee, he has enough momentum that he's able to finish the takedown.
Okay, we're going to work a high-level finish now where we clear it to a treetop position, or you get in a situation where a guy has long legs and he's a hard one to get down. You can't bring him in close. He's real good at reacting. And so this time I'm going to roll my shoulder and put him down on the mat. This time, to set him up for a single leg, I'm going to feed him my wrist in this position right here. When he grabs it, I'm going to bring it across here, and I'm just going to turn him in this angle, continue to walk in, create this position right here. Now your opponent immediately brings his leg to the outside and blocks on the outside. That creates a situation where I'd really want to try to flare, but he's in good position and maybe he has my wrist. That's one of the most basic counters in that position. He's going to start fighting my wrist. From this position right here, I'm just going to switch and collect my forearm up here. If he has it real tight, I'll come all the way up to this position here. But in this position right here, he's taken away my flare, and he has good position for me to run the pipe. That's real hard for me to do. So in this position, what I'm going to do, I'm here, here, even up here. But I'm going to roll my shoulder in this direction. And when I do that, that's going to put pressure on him, make his weight go forward. Now, if he doesn't post on the mat, his head will hit the mat. So from this position right here, he's got my wrist here. I'm going to roll my shoulder in this position. That's the reaction that will occur. So I'm going to roll my shoulder, and then I'm going to trip the far side and complete the takedown. Feeding my wrist from this position right here. Even if he starts to pull this leg back, I just follow it. I get the leg up, but he posts on the outside. He immediately goes for my wrist. I grab my own forearm in a forearm hook. Now, what I'd really like to do is rest his leg on my thigh. From there, I'm going to put his head in the mat. I roll my shoulder. From that position right there, I'm going to block the far leg and go ahead and get the takedown. Remember, when you roll the shoulder, the concept of making his head go into the mat so that he'll let go of the wrist and post a hand. Again, we're working single legs where a man's blocking you on the outside. I'm going to roll my shoulder. If he doesn't go down or he gets a good reaction where he comes back up, I'm going to now put him in a treetop position by jacking his leg up. So I'm going to feed him my wrist, clear the wrist off here. Remember, when I clear the wrist here, I'm going to take this down. And not all the way across my body, but down in that position. The reason I do that is to put weight on this foot. When weight's on that foot, now I'm going to follow it up to here. He doesn't like this position. He goes to block to the outside. I rest that right on my thigh. He's controlling my wrist again. I'm going to roll my shoulder, try to put his head on the mat, but he's going to react and come up quick. When that occurs, from this position right here, I'm now just going to bring this up to my armpit. Here. Immediately come up. Now, two things I want to worry about here. One, I want to make sure there's no space between his leg and my armpit. I want it tight because I don't want him to be able to turn and kick out. If he turns in their space, he'll kick out, right? I want to make sure this is jacked up high so when he turns, there's no place for him to go, right? So the next thing that happens is he'll block my hips, shoulders, some situation where he's keeping distance and balance here, away from me. From here, I'm going to do a couple things. One, I'm going to post his elbow and trip the inside here, just like that. If he's posting with this hand and keeping away, I'm just going to cuff the head and trip inside. Great situation for freestyle wrestling where I can take him down and get 3 or possibly 5 points if I sweep the leg high enough. If he's posting this opposite shoulder, I post above the elbow and trip. So, again, the reaction off of him when he blocks to the outside, I feed him the wrist, controlling this. He blocks outside, I roll the shoulder. He adjusts, I bring it up in this position. And then trip and take him to the back side. From that position, you can inside trip. You can hit an inside trip, but I constantly think in freestyle terms where I'm looking for 3 points rather than 1. If I inside trip, where I trip above the knee here, I can score points and maybe go to a leg lace, but most times against a good wrestler I'll end up with 1 point in this situation. And I put him in a tripod situation where you may end up here and there's no takedowns in freestyle. Collegiate you would because the weight's on the hand. But when you trip them to the backside, you have the opportunity to get more points. So when you drill this technique, make sure you take and get as many back points as you can.
As you study the following examples of treetop finishes, pay not only attention to how they got there, but the patience and position they show in finishing it.
One of the last finishes we're going to do on a high-level single leg is look for back points off this. I'm going to get in a situation with a high-level single leg where he's blocking me on the outside. Post the shoulder, got a good single leg, he's posting me on the outside. I'm immediately going to roll my shoulder and put him in this position, in a tripod situation. From here, I'm going to let go of this single leg. And I'm going to do that by taking this hand and just cupping the thigh. Once I cup the thigh, this hand now is going to go deep into the crotch here. From that position, I'm going to lift and step over this far leg here. From there, now I'm going to take him into a Turk position. When you get into the high single leg, right here, I'm going to put him down. From that position, I'm going to take this hand, cup above the knee. The next hand goes high. Now I'm going to lift, step high, put my opponent on the back in a Turk.
Here's a variation of this Turk as a finish for a single leg with Vugaruchev, world champion Olympic medalist from Belarus.
We're going to work low-level finishes to a head inside single And one of the things that happens in wrestling oftentimes, if your opponent gets, when you walk to your opponent, he blocks you with his thumbs. So this time I'm going to walk to my opponent. When he posts me and he has his thumb inside and I try to hit a single leg or I try to pull this arm, I'm not able to do it very well. Couple things you can do here. One, I'm going to roll this shoulder. When I say roll the shoulder, I'm going to turn it like this. I'm controlling his elbow. Now I'm going to walk in and pop that thumb off. Once I get that thumb over the back of my arm here, I close the distance here. Now he can't pull his arm away. He can't get it away from me. So I'm in good position to attack this leg with a high crotch or a single leg, and we're going to work low-level single legs now. So that's the situation, that's the position I'm going to walk when he posts. Now, if you have a guy that's real strong in here with a nice grip, you try to roll your shoulder and you can't pop it off, just take this hand right here and give it a little push. Again, make sure you're protecting this leg as you do this. From there, I'm going to close the gap again, and now I'm going to hit a single leg. I'm going to step outside, but as I do, he reacts, and I'll end up in front of my opponent here, right here. From this position, I immediately want to get to the backside. Backside is best. I don't have to grip this leg very good. I'm going to keep it right on the shin. My hand will be on his shin. I'm going to let go, post in this situation here, and go to the backside. Get behind my opponent, left arm out for the takedown. So I'm going to go low level, single leg. He posts, pop it off. I'm going to take a little step back, bring that leg forward, and hit my single leg here. But when he sprawls, I immediately want to post and tripod here. Now, I'm going to circle to the backside, get behind my opponent, cross the leg. From there, this hand's going to pick this leg up, and I'm going to limp arm out. Most wrestlers will get in a whizzer situation here, like this. From this position right here, this leg's up. I'm going to reach this ankle, turn my palm up, limp arm out to here. So the first thing I want to do is try to get to the backside. Another important thing on this low-level single leg, when I get to this position right here, if he's stretching me out, I want to try to get my knee back underneath him here. From there, I tripod up, circle to the backside.
Tim Vanny uses a D-spin penetration to help him post and circle behind his opponent. Notice how he controls the foot and elevates it until he's able to reach around and scoop the far knee. Zeke Jones posts the mat with his right hand as he begins to circle behind his opponent. He scoops the far ankle. He has to move back out front momentarily in order to clear his head as he comes back around for the finish. John Smith posts on his head as he circles behind his opponent for a finish on this single leg. Once behind, he limp arms out, secures the far ankle, and the finish.
Low-level single leg again with my head to the inside. This time I'm going to hit a single leg. My partner's going to react, and I'm going to try to get to the backside. But if he understands what keeps me from getting to the backside, he's going to block my hip. Right? I'm in this position right here, and I'm going to hit a single leg here. But to keep me from getting to the backside, he's going to block my hip. Right here. And that's real important for him to do. From this position right here, I'm going to raise this leg up now and slide my other knee between his legs. Because I can't circle this way, he has me blocked off. So now this leg will slide in between and up here in this position. From here, I can control this. I'm going to raise him up, come out the back into this position here, all the way out the back. But understand why you do this. First, I want to try to get to the back side. But he's going to block my hip, not allow me to get around there. And he can do that by posting on my hip or reaching around my stomach so I can't circle. But the other part of this is I'm hooked right on his shin. If I'm blocked and holding his leg up by his knee in this situation right here, and he posts and sprawls, he'll stretch me out. And I don't want that to occur. So I'm going to use one hand hooking on his shin here. And when he tries to sprawl, he can't really do it because it brings this foot off the mat. From that situation, my inside knee goes between his legs. Here. Now I'm going to get back in good position, posting with this hand, coming out the back for the finish.
Let's look at some examples of this post and duck up between the legs finish for the single leg takedown.
The next situation that occurs on a low-level single leg with your head to the inside is when your opponent has blocked your hips, and he can actually have this hand on the back of my head so that I'm in this position and he's sprawled out, he's countering me tough in here, and I can't get back between here very well right now. So what I'm going to do is step to the outside this time with this foot, and I'm going to slide my head across, slide this knee across in this position. And we call that a cut across. So he's in this position. I'm in a single leg now, and he's battling me real tough in here. Outside leg up, my head goes across his body. This knee slides underneath here, and I'm cutting across his body for the cut across takedown on the low single leg.
Notice how T.J. Jaworski pulls at the knee while driving with the outside leg and uses his head to help drive his opponent to the hip on this finish.
Next situation in a low-level single leg with your head to the inside is when I hit the single leg here, opponent sprawls out, and he leaves his hand down just like that. In that position, I'm going to trap that and do a far side carry or a dump. I'm going to slide my knee closest to his hand forward. From there, I'm going to trap the arm and dump my opponent on the side. So on your feet, it'll look like this. I'm going to hit a single leg here. He sprawls. A lot of times they post that hand just like that. I immediately take my outside knee forward and hit a dump. Keeping my head on his chest, waiting for him to try to turn in, and when he does, I'll catch him. If he turns towards me, catch him on his back here. The next situation that occurs where you can hit a dump is when a guy underhooks the far side when I shoot a single leg takedown. In this position, shoot the single, and he blocks it right here. Immediately step up with the outside leg, trap the arm, and dump it. We'll talk more about the trap when we get into fireman's carries. It's real simple. Thumb in. I'm going to hook his arm here, keep this tight. This knee is already slid up because I'm in a single leg position. He sprawled way back there in this situation. Knee slides up, hit the dump. The next technique, we're going to work off the low-level single leg. Remember, these techniques are with my head to the inside. It's when an opponent wraps around your waist or around your ankle. And we covered this in the double leg situation, and it's identical. But watch what I do to trap his wrist in both cases. The first one will be when he wraps around my waist to block me. From here, I shoot my low single here. I'm in pretty good position here, but he is wrapped around my waist. From here, I'm going to slide my leg forward again. I'm posting, not both hands, I'm posting this hand here, and I slide my inside knee forward here. From there, now I'm in pretty good position. I'm going to trap his wrist. From there, I'm going to set him back in this position. I want to try to catch this elbow if I can here. I want to make sure I get my points while he's trying to react. He's turning left, he's turning right, my butt's off. Now I want to go for the pin because I've already got my points. Don't turn towards the hips. Hip highs towards his head. Here. And slide this around here in this position. And look for the pin. The next situation is when he grabs my wrist or grabs my ankle. I'm in this position, he comes over the top, he's got my ankle, I shift all my weight right to that. Now watch, in this situation right here, I don't really want to let go of this leg. But I want to post here so I can lift with it. From this position right here, I'm going to take him over his shoulder here and set him here. I'm probably one of the strongest guys in the world and probably can just lift him with my right hand. But it makes it a lot easier when he comes over the top for me to post this hand. From there, I'm going to slide my knees forward, trap his hand, and come over the top in this position. Again, don't hip highs towards the legs, hip highs towards the head. Here.
Here's the master of the low-level single, John Smith, with several examples of trapping both the wrist and the ankle as a finish to this low-level single.
The next technique we're going to do on a low-level single leg with my head to the inside is for a person who really likes to hit a double leg. From this position right here, when I'm in a single leg and this guy's starting to cover my head and position, I'm immediately, when that starts to occur, when he starts pushing my head, I'm going to block this far knee and lift. Right? So I'm in this position. I'm going to actually try to bring this knee down, block it, and dump. This position right here, I'm going to bring this knee down by backing up a little bit, locking this leg, and lifting. Another situation that you can get in with the low-level single leg with your head to the inside. And this occurs oftentimes with a real good wrestler, a wrestler that's been coached well, he's well disciplined. What he's going to try to do is get his belly button right on the top of my head, and he can go to a body lock position or a whizzer situation, or block both my hips. In this situation right here, what I want to be able to do is hit what we call a peek out. So I'm in a low single leg here, guy's covering my head, and he's sprawled out.
Now, I'm in not very good position right here, so I'm going to have to adjust right away. And one of the areas that I can attack is an opening. I only have two ways to go, this side or this side. The key to this is the way I throw my elbow. I'm going to post my outside leg up, I'm going to throw my elbow, and I'm going to throw it hard. Here. When I throw it, I still want my hips to be square to my opponent's hips. I don't want to throw this and set in this position. I've seen too many wrestlers get stepped over here and put on their back, right? So the position I'm going to try to do, I'm going to raise my outside leg. I'm not in a very good position right here. I have to be able to adjust. I'm throwing my elbow, clearing my head out, but my hips will stay square to my opponent. From there, I'll go into a double leg, right? Now, low-level single leg, head is inside, and I'm in a trap position. Leg up, just pop your head out a little bit. Now this foot is really going to drive. Drive back over your opponent. So you're going to get in a peek-out situation when he's over the top, where you're throwing your elbow, peeking your head out, but keeping your hips square to your opponent's hips, and then driving across him. The next takedown technique that we're going to work on is a high crotch series. And basically what a high crotch is a head outside single leg. There's a lot of different ways to get to the high crotch situation. And we're just going to work out of a couple of those as setups. But we're going to work on a lot of different finishes. One thing that I think is very important for you to think about when you do a high crotch and a head outside single is for me to keep my hips square to my opponent's hips. The other thing I want you to think about when we do this high crotch series is when I use an inside step and when I use an outside step. When I use a high crotch and if my partner or opponent is stationary or moving away from me, I have to use an inside step to get to my opponent. If my opponent pushes on me or leans on me, that's when I'll use an outside step. And we'll do both these situations so you kind of get a feel for which one you need to do. But a high crotch, I'm going to take my opponent's arm over the top this time. And my opponent's arm, anytime I grab my opponent or get in a situation where I've made contact, that's what I call the control point. It's coming over the top this time. So I'm going to walk to my opponent. He's going to tie me up with his hand. When he does, I'm going to control his elbow and take that over the top for a high crotch. Walking to him, when he touches there, I'm going to control the elbow here rather than taking it down. This time I'm going to take it over the top. If he's posting with the thumb again, remember, I'm going to roll that and pop it off right there. In this situation right here, my opponent came to me and leaned on me, so I'm going to use an outside step. From here, I'm going to outside step, knee goes down, and I'm up in good position. This is very important to remember in this situation right here, that my hips are square to my opponent's hips. I don't want in a situation where I turn too far here and my hips are not square to my opponent's. This allows my opponent to put the leg in or spin behind me and beat my shoulder. We don't want that situation to occur. I want to keep my opponent right in front of me by keeping my hips square. The technique we're going to do off of this high crotch series is first, we want to get to our feet as quick as possible. I'm going to take his arm over the top, so I'm going to walk to him. When he ties me up, control the arm. I push on him a little bit, so he pushes back. When he pushes back, I'm going to outside step here, in this position right here. From here, I'm already in position to cut the angle across. Now this is very important what I do with my head. Once I block this, I wrap this arm around here tight. I want to take the calf right here. So when he tries to sprawl, I've got it blocked off and he can't. right? From this position, I'm going to put all his weight on the far side, his far foot. From here, I'm going to come up into this position. From there, my foot is pointed 90 degrees, so I'm going to make an L. From there, I'm going to swing this leg to the outside. When I do that, my inside hand is going to block the knee, and I'm going to flare my opponent down here. So I swing this as I step and block.
From elbow control, as his opponent pushes into him, Chris Campbell outside steps to this high crotch, turning the corner for the finish as his opponent's momentum carries him forward and down to the mat. Again at normal speed, Sergey Small outside steps from elbow control, and as his inside knee steps up, his opponent sprawls. He repenetrates with an outside step. He comes up to his feet. Changing to the double, he flares for this finish. Again at normal speed. From a non-contact position, Sergey Small drop steps to a low-level high crotch and comes up as he changes to a double, blocking the far knee and flares for the finish. Again at normal speed. Joe Pantelio drop steps to this high crotch, changes off to a double, and drives across for the finish.
This time on the high crotch, I'm going to do it off an inside tie-up. And I want my opponent to be moving away from me a little bit, so I have to use the inside step. So as I walk to my opponent and he puts hands on me, I'm going to come inside. I've got an inside tie-up right here. But this time, rather than pushing on me, he's got a 1-point lead and he's stepping back a little bit. So this time I have to get to my opponent. I'm going to post, step. He's still moving away from me. I've used my inside step here. This leg's done all it's going to do. It immediately comes up. So that I'm in good position right here. From this position right here, I'm trying to flare, and he's hopping to the outside. He even grabbed a hold of my wrist. From this position, I'm going to run the pipe and set him down. I'm going to change directions, run the pipe, and set him down.
As he changes levels, Brad Penrith pops his opponent's arm up and penetrates to this high crotch. As he changes off to a double, his opponent has him underhooked and begins to elevate. Brad fakes a lift, his opponent's feet are spread, and runs the pipe to finish.
Another little setup is when your opponent's trying to keep distance from you and he's trying to keep you away. Obviously, if he's trying to keep you away, he's either stationary or he's going to be moving away from you a little bit. When that occurs, remember, you use an inside step. I'm going to keep my hips square. If I walk my opponent, but he's posting me off here, he doesn't want to get close. I'm going to go to a wrist tie up here and roll this hand from the inside out so I'm turning it. When he's backing up, he's moving away from me, but at the same time I'm controlling the wrist. I turn the wrist, I inside step into a high crotch situation. Remember, this leg comes up immediately. It comes up in this position. I shift the weight across with my head and the outside foot here, and now I'm going to try to flare. But he's doing a good job of blocking my arm. So when I can't flare my opponent and my foot's 90 degrees, I'm going to try to run the pipe. But he's got real good balance, but when his hips come back into me, I'm now going to switch my grip back up here. Watch what I'm going to do. Switch my grip and lift in this position. All right? He's posting me off. Inside step. Here. He's posting me. I try to run the pipe. Can't do it, so I'm going to switch directions. Drive in here. This hand now is going to come high, and I lift my opponent up. From here, I'm actually going to swing him back and finish.
Let's look at several examples of this lift as a finish for the high crotch.
to be in a low-level situation where my opponent keeps me trapped down on the mat. So I'm going to this time work off an inside tie-up. I'm going to walk to my opponent. When he puts hands on, I'm going to inside tie, and he's going to be pushing on me a little bit, so it'll be a push and a go. Remember, anytime pressure's into me, I use an outside step. Makes things real easy. I walk in, I come to inside position here. My opponent's pushing on me a little bit. I'm going to outside step and hit my high crotch right here. Make sure your opponent's leaning on you a little bit. Right here, I'm going to outside step and hit my high crotch in this position right here. From this position right here, he's got my arm blocked off pretty good. Right here. So it makes it pretty difficult for me to just change off here. So what I'm going to have to be able to do, let's turn around in this direction so they can see, is put this leg up on this leg. And I'm going to do that by pushing and taking all the weight, all my opponent's weight, and putting it on this far foot, right? And even if he's squatting down in here and fighting me pretty tough, my head pushes across here. Once I've changed and I can feel that I've shifted the weight there, I want to take this leg right here and put it right up here. Just like that. From there, now, he can't stop me, even if he's blocking my arm, from reaching across here for a double leg. Right? So I'm in a high crotch, a low level situation, changing off to a double leg. But the key to this is to be able to take his weight and put it across. So this leg has to be up. I'm pushing, I have good head pressure in here. He's blocking my arm tough. But when he pushes here, I'm going to take this foot, put it right up there. Once I get it up there, now I can relax a little bit. Switch to a double leg and turn him down here. This time I'm going to do a high crotch. I'm going to walk to my opponent. He's going to post off on my head. I'm going to control his wrist and hit a high crotch with an inside step. Walking into him, when he posts, I'm going to take this and turn it down to the inside. When I turn it, he starts to back away a little bit and pull his arm. When he does, I follow it, and I'm in this position. I'm in a good low-level, high crotch. One of the first things I want to be able to do in this situation, because he has me blocked off real well, is just raise this arm up. And I want to raise my elbow up and point it out across this way. From this position right here, I'm going to switch my grip, and from here, I'm just going to lift him in that position. From there, now I'm going to reach across and hook this ankle right here. From here, I'm going to set him down on his hip, right here. Finishes here, usually this leg will go straight. When he straightens his leg, I'm going to turn him right here and keep him on his back. So one of the first things I want to look for is a lift on a low-level, high crotch. And I'm going to do that when he's blocking my arm off and won't allow me to switch to a double leg. If I walk to my opponent, clearing this wrist, he starts to pull it back. I'm going to follow it right here. When I follow it, I let it go. I'm in this position, and he has me blocked off pretty tough right here. I can't get across. He actually wants to get the corner and get my shoulder. This hand's going to come up, just like that. I want to change my grip, lock my forearm hook. Now I'm going to lift him up. Once I've lifted him, come off my haunches, now I want to take and hook this foot right here. So I want to look for back points on this. Setting him down here, straightens his leg, and turn. This time my opponent's going to post me off on this shoulder. I'm going to take the control point across my body, hit a high crotch, and this time he's going to sprawl on me a little bit and block off my arm. Right? Walk to my opponent. When he posts, I control the wrist here. I take it across my body and inside step from my high crotch right here. Remember, this leg's done all it's going to do. From this position right here, my opponent immediately sprawls. He's got his legs back in this position. From here, I'm not in very good shape, and I'm going to have to adjust right away. I can't switch across because he has my arm blocked. But I'm looking right at this ankle right here. What I want to be able to do is grab that ankle. At the same time, my head is going to slide right down below his knee in this angle right here. From there, I'm pulling this. There's tough pressure against his knee here. My head slides right behind the knee, and I continue back behind my opponent. Again, I've hit we'll do it from up here. He posts off. I'm going to take the hand across, inside step to this high crotch in this position. When he sprawls, and I'm in tough position right here. I want to take this ankle. My head will slide down below his knee right here. So this leg comes up, and I switch the angle right here. Once in this position, you don't have to be in too big a hurry. I'm pulling this knee to me in this direction right here. Don't keep your head up above here. It gives him an opportunity to neck wrench you or lat pull you up in here. And he's able to square his hips up. As I hit my high crotch this time, my opponent will be reaching for me. I'm going to post at his elbow, hit my high crotch. As I walk to him and he reaches, I immediately post. I don't want to wait very long here. I've scouted my opponent. I know he's going to reach. When I walk to him and he reaches, I inside step and hit my high crotch. As he starts to sprawl in this position right here, I'm going to bring my knee, this near knee down. As I do that and I shift my weight back, it'll bring the opposite knee down. So from this position right here, he's sprawling a little bit. I'm going to change directions and bring this knee down right here. And notice when I pulled back, the opposite knee came down. Even if he's around my waist, this position right here, I'm now going to reach over the top and grab here. Hook right over the top, hook a shin. From that position, I drive him over here, again, looking for a freestyle tilt. In this position, or from this position right here, in collegiate style, I would actually step over the top, trap my opponent here. I'm going to hit a high crotch, and this time my opponent's going to get an angle on me. He's already just about to beat me, but I don't want to give it up so quick. When I get into a high crotch situation here, and he starts around me, he's going around me right here. Don't give this up so quick. Couple things you can do, but the first thing I want to try to do is get back and control his hips. Remember, look where my hips are in relationship to my opponent's. I wanted to keep my hips square to my opponent, but he's already beat the angle. He's the one who created the situation, and he feels like he's in pretty good shape here. But from this position right here, all I want to be able to do is post this hand. And I'm going to change directions and post this hand and elevate this leg right here. From this position, now I'm going to come on out the back, setting down here. So it looks like this. I'm going to walk into him, hit my high crotch. When he starts there, I'm going to raise him up. Make sure you post this hand down. But once I have control of his hips, I have control of my opponent. From this position now, I continue to keep this leg, and I'm going to come on out the back, right here. The next situation in a high crotch is when my opponent starts to get an angle on me, but rather than me elevating him up this time, I'm going to set him on his hip. So I'm walking in, I have inside control here, I push on my opponent, he pushes on me. When he does, I'm going to outside step to my high crotch. When I get into this position right here, and he starts to get the corner on me, and I feel real uncomfortable. Here, I'm going to change levels, put my shoulder below his knee, right here. When I do that, I set him on his hip. Now, once I set him on his hip, some key points for me. One, I want my shoulder to stay in his lap or on his thigh. The second thing is, I actually want my hip to the outside of his foot. I don't want it on the inside here, where if he's strong, he's able to lift my hips up and take me over the top. So I want to switch the angle out here. The next thing that's very important is for me to stay below his knee with this hand. I have to keep the leverage, and I stay down on his ankle. I don't want to lock around the knee because his hips are too strong. From this position right here, I rock my opponent up and put my near leg underneath his ankle and just try to get points for freestyle or collegiately. I would walk up in this position right here. I've trapped his leg with my right knee, and I would actually keep him here for a while. The next thing I do from that situation, once I get in here, he starts to get the corner, I set him on his hip. From this position right here, as I start to walk him back and elevate his ankle, he's going to post his hand here, and now I'm just going to pull back in this position right here. From here, I have his ankle tight. When he starts to turn or go down, I'm in good position for the takedown. The next thing, if I'm in this position right here, my hips on the outside and he posts, and I pull back this time, I'm just going to reach back and grab his wrist. This time when I raise back, I'm going to pull him actually in this position. One more time. I'm going to hit my high crotch. This position, he's getting the angle. I set him on his hip. As I elevate this time, he sets his hand down. I grab that hand right here, and I'm just going to pull back, pop my head up. Here. And then finish on my opponent. Another low-level finish off a high crotch situation when your opponent starts to get around the corner. And this is better for collegiate than it is for freestyle. I'm in here. He started to get the corner on my shoulder. I change levels, but get my shoulder below his knee and set him down here. From this position, this guy's a real scrambler, and he's staying in good position. I'm going to post my head right here, and I'm going to elevate and cartwheel across my opponent right here. Now, the reason you don't want to do this is in freestyle, if he continues or gets a hold of my hips and kicks me over, sometimes they have a tendency to give 2 and 2. For example, when I post and kick over, they may give 2 points there, even if I end up on top. But collegiately, it's a real solid move. I set him down on his hip, post my head. In this position, I cartwheel over my opponent right here. Again, I'm in a hip heist position here, and I don't want to rotate towards his legs. I want to hip heist up towards his head in this position. I'm in a high crotch position down here, and my opponent's already got the angle on me. He's beating my shoulder. Again, I'm going to change levels so my shoulder gets below his knee. As I do that, I set him on his hip. I set my opponent on his hip. A lot of guys will immediately go to the bar half situation here. Don't panic in this, and don't try to really go this way. What I'm going to do is lay back and actually take his head. I'm going to switch my hips here, lay back, just like this. From this position, now I'm going to leg back over and put him on his back, right here. High crotch, good position. He started to get the angle. Go down low, set your opponent on the hip, and he is wrapped around my waist. There we go. He's tight. He's around me tough. I'm going to actually trap his elbow, but grab his wrist here. From this position right here, remember it's the same. My hips to the outside, my hips down, so he can't lift me up. As he starts to lift, I stay low, right here. This time as he starts to lift, I'm going to post my head, rock him over, and look for back points of the fall. All the situations in this low-level, high crotch situation, when it occurs, when your opponent starts to beat your shoulder, and he's created an angle on you, not to panic, you set him on his hip and work one of these low-level finishes.
Finish from the high crotch. Take the time to analyze each one carefully from start to finish. You'll find that the athletes exhibit a great deal of patience in setting up, looking for just the right finish from this low-level position.
next takedown series we're going to work on, and technique from our feet, is our duck under series. There's some basic things that you need to know about a duck under. First of all, anytime your opponent's elbows come away from his body, you can hit a duck under. Again, we have to go back to our basic skills on when to do an inside step and when to do an outside step. If my opponent's stationary or moving away from me, I have to do an inside step. If my opponent's pushing on me, it's better to do an outside step. And we're going to do the duck under with 2 or 3 of these different situations. The number one and most important thing in all these takedown situations is for me to stay in good position. Our first basic skill. The first technique I'm going to work on with a duck under is off of wrist control. As I get this wrist control, my opponent's going to back away from me. So if he's backing away, I'm going to have to use an inside step. The second thing that's very important off this duck under is for me to keep my head up. If my eyes look down to the mat, he'll be able to put a front headlock on me, snap me down, and spin me. So when I walk to my opponent and he posts, I clear the wrist, I'm going to inside step here, hit my duck under. But as I hit it, I'm looking up. From that position there, I keep my head back here tight so he can't get his arm, and I finish in this position. If he were to try to bring his hand between his body and mine, I have it trapped with my head. The second thing is, as I do this duck under, if I step to the outside and he steps away from me, that creates too much space between my hips and his. Here. And he'll be able to get this arm back and catch me here. So I'm going to step right between the legs on my inside step. Walk to him, turn it, hit my duck in this position right here. Now I'm going to come up and finish in here tight, hitting the duck under off of wrist control. The next duck under we're going to do is when he controls my wrist. Now this is exactly the same. He's got my wrist and he's stationary or he's moving back to me. So I'm going to actually feed him my hand. When I do that, I'm going to clear that out and create space between his elbow and his side. Remember, anytime his elbow is away from his side, I can hit a duck under. From this position right here, I'm going to cuff the head, inside step, pop here. Now when I do this, again, my head is up tight. I now pick up the outside leg. My hips are in tight. I'm going to pop my hips, take my opponent down. Finish with a lift. All these duck unders carry some basic truths to them. One, I don't look down to the mat. If I do a duck under and my face is looking towards the mat, he's in perfect position to front headlock me and snap me down. Here. But if I do the technique correctly and keep my head up with his elbow away from his side, and I get here, now if he tries to front headlock me, he can't do it. I'm in good position. Good solid stance. Remember, don't look down to the mat or he'll snap you down. So on any of these various duck unders, make sure you keep your head and eyes up.
Here are some examples of duck unders when your opponent has wrist control as well as some finishes. The next duck under we're going to do is off an underhook position.
And this time off the underhook position, I'm going to get it, and I'm going to push into him and get him to lean back on me a little bit. When I do that, off this duck under, he'll be pushing on me so I can use an outside step. I'm going to come in, control my partner's head, pull it to the side, which creates space between his elbow and his side. From there, I'm going to go to my underhook, and I'm going to push on my opponent. As he starts to push back, I raise my elbow up, right here. I have my underhook cupped on his shoulder. From this position, I'm going to outside step to right here. From there, I now push off, finish in this position here, and finish with my double leg finishes or lift. The next series I'm going to do off this duck under and off an underhook is actually duck the opposite side. But same type of situation. Remember, the two things that are important on the duck under, if his elbow comes away from his body, you can do a duck under on that side. And the second thing is make sure your eyes don't look at the mat. This time I'm going to cup his head, underhook the far side. But he's doing a good job of, he gets his head back on this side, he's got his elbow down, but look on this side now. He's created a little space there. So I'm going to go to a little elbow control, and now I'm going to outside step again, head's on me, and I'm just going to pop in this position. Again, my head is up, it's tied on his shoulder, and I'm coming up into this position.
Here are some excellent examples of an underhook to a duck under with the finishes.
The next duck under we're going to do is when my opponent has done a good job and he's fought into a position where he has an underhook on me, which puts me in an overhook position. The key to this situation is when he gets his underhook, for me to take this arm right here, I'm going to come back hard near the elbow and try to bring this down. As I do that, as I bring this arm down, it'll raise this side. So he's got his underhook. When I bring this down, it brings the opposite arm up. That's when I'm going to pull this down and hit a duck under to the opposite side. And then go to one of my double leg finishes. So again, he gets an underhook. I'm going to pressure down. As I pressure down, I'm going to hit a duck under to the opposite side of the underhook. Go to your finish.
Joe Melchiori ducks to the opposite side as his opponent attempts to underhook him.
You can actually do an underhook or a duck under off an open position where I don't have contact with my partner. And if you're quick, this is the way you set it up. You may only want to teach this to your quick wrestlers. I'm going to post on his arm, just like that. I'm posting, bringing my hand back. When I do that, anytime I reach to my opponent, 90% of the time they want to reach back. Once he starts to reach for me, here, I'm immediately, as I bring my hand back, outside step, and hitting the duck under. Again, this will be an outside step, and the reason is this. When I post on the shoulder and he reaches, his weight will come forward. Remember, if there's pressure back into me, I can outside step. So I post, bring my hand back, but when he reaches, I'm immediately outside stepping, coming back in this position. If you can, one of the good finishes in this position here, I'm going to outside step, post here. When I bring my hand back but create space here, I hit my duck here, and now I'm going to step to the far side of my opponent right here. And as I lift, I'm taking my opponent straight to his back. One more time. I'm in here. When he reaches, my hand comes back. I outside step, but I'm coming clear across my opponent here. Taking the leg or a bear hug situation.
Mike Van Arsdale steps inside then out on this duck to a double from an open stance. John Jarrett continues his outside step and drive in order to finish this duck under from an open position. Douglas uses this duck under from an open position to take his opponent down.
Duck under from a head and bicep situation is off of motion. And again, I can do this with an outside step or inside step. As I secure a head and bicep tie-up where I'm pushing on the arm, I'm pushing on it here. I have the head tied. When he pushes back with this arm, now I'm going to, because he's leaning into me, I outside step right here. Again, I have this trapped, a lot of space between my hips and his hips, so I'm immediately going to follow it up and come around my opponent here, continuing to take him down. This time as I do a head and wrist tie-up, I'm going to walk to him, but he's got my wrist in this position. Head and bicep, or head and wrist. This time, he's kind of moving away from me a little bit, so this time I inside step, hit my duck. Remember, this leg's done all it's going to do. Don't stay here where your opponent can step over you. Immediately bring it up into this position. Head and wrist, head and bicep. Head and bicep one more time. I've got a good tie up here. I'm using my hook, pushing on his bicep. When he's leaning back, I outside step. Head is up. And I immediately finish with a double leg or a lift. Next duck under we're going to work off of is off an elbow and a wrist control. So I'm going to walk to my opponent. When he posts me off here, I immediately grab his elbow. Again, I need to clear this hand off right here. So what I'm going to do is roll my shoulder and pop that hand off. Remember, once I get it off, he can't pull it back. I keep my elbow bent. I'm hooked just above his. He has my wrist here. Now I'm going to create some space here where I'm stepping and hitting my duck under. Remember, this leg comes up immediately. I'm in a double leg position. The next thing you can do off this same situation, I walk to him, he posts. Again, he's posting off here, so I roll my shoulder and pop the hand off. Once I've popped it off, now I'm going to actually raise up here, and as I raise this arm, that leg will go back some. When it goes back, I'll hit a duck under, back to the other side.
In the wrist and elbow control, Joe Melchior executes a duck under on Sergei Small. Terry Colott uses double elbow control to set up this duck under. Steve Knight uses his opponent's pressure into him to set up this duck to the opposite side with an outside step. Gregolowski snaps his opponent down to head control. When his opponent begins to pressure up, he then executes this technique. As his opponent defends his high crotch attempt, Pete Roselli secures elbow control and uses this duck under as a secondary attack to finish the takedown. Here's an example of a duck under when your opponent has a front headlock on you with Rob Cole.
We're going to work on now is a fireman's carry. What you have to keep in mind with a fireman's carry is that there's several different types. I don't necessarily advocate that one is better than the other, but I do believe the fireman's carry we're going to work on today is safer than some of the others that you can work on. The fireman's carry that I'm going to do, I have to have an overhook in this position here. I have to be over the arm. It doesn't make any difference if I start with an inside control and then take it to this position. But I have to end up in this position. Again, when I hit my fireman's carry, my knee is going to go right between his legs, here. So it looks almost identical to the high crotch, only this time I have an arm. Couple things I have to think about. One, I don't want this elbow pointed up. If I point this elbow up, he's able to rotate his wrist and get his arm out, right? So, as I hook, just on his tricep here, just above his elbow, I pinch this arm down. I want to trap his arm in there. From that position, his foot is right between my legs, right here. Fireman's carry to both knees, right here. From this position right here, I'm going to take a little step with my knee to get his weight shifting this way. I have his arm trapped. I'm pulling down on it. My head is tied up against the back of his shoulder. From this position, now I'm going to raise him up here. I don't really like to keep hold of the leg. And the reason I don't like to do that, a leg rider or a guy that has a good figure four can tie this arm up and look for a stalemate situation. So I'm not going to worry about keeping a hold of this leg. As I take the step, his weight goes forward. Now I'm taking him to this position here. Notice that I'm flat with both feet able to drive here. I'm not on my knees. I'm all the way down on my side. My head is tied on his chest. I've still got his arm trapped here so that he can't turn his wrist and get his arm out. From this position, he can't turn to his left. If he tries to turn that way, I have this arm and he can't go. The only direction he can turn is into me. And as he starts to turn, my head comes up. Another hip hike, basic skill. A variation of this fireman's carry is the same, but in this situation, I'm going to be on this side of it. And I'm going to tie this arm up. But he feels pretty comfortable because he has me blocked off with his head in this situation. From here, I'm going to step with this foot, go to both knees, right here. When I get in this position, I'm trapping his arm here, catching it with my elbow, taking a step with my knee, and trapping him right here. When he tries to turn into me again, catching him to the pin. Fireman's carry to both knees.
Here's an example of this fireman's carry with world champion Greco-Roman of Belarus. John Smith drops both knees in his fireman's carry, then continues to control his opponent's arm and leg to hold him on his back for exposure. Former world champion Sergey Small cartwheels over on this fireman's carry, then bridges back into his opponent to hold him there for back exposure. He then comes back over, continues to control the bottom leg, goes to the head, and drives him over for the pin.
The next technique we're going to do is a near arm and far leg. And it's the same situation that can occur off a fireman's carry situation. So that's why we put it in here. Some people call this an outside fireman's. But basically it's a near arm, this situation here, and a far leg. And I can do this off inside control, or I can have his arm hooked. But as I walk to my opponent and he posts off on me, I'm going to come inside here. I'm going to actually circle to my left a little bit in a square stance and bring this leg up. As I do that, I bring that leg up there, and now my knee goes down. I'm outside step because I had him coming to me a little bit, and I hit this position right here. And in this position right here, most wrestlers are going to try to sprawl on you. As he does that, I'm going to take a step with this far knee and set him down. Again, ending up in the fireman's position. I want my hips down. I want my head on his chest, and when he turns back into me, I want to come up and finish in this pinned position. A lot of times in this near arm far leg situation, you end up with just a single leg because he can get his arm out. But it's a good way to set your opponent up. I'm going to take a step to the side. When the leg comes forward, I'm going to hit a near arm, a far leg. Head is up. Again, I'm pinching this thing down tight, and actually it works better if your opponent starts to sprawl. Now I take my step, set my opponent down.
World and Olympic champion Arsen Fedzayev starts with a near arm far leg carry, goes to a single, then back to the near arm far leg to complete the takedown. Former world champion and Olympic medalist Zeke Jones uses a head and bicep tie to set up this near arm far leg carry. Here's another example of a near arm far leg carry with Rob Eider.
Two other situations that you're able to hit the fireman's carry or the near arm far leg is out of a double bicep tie-up and the front headlock situation from standing. So I'm going to do the double bicep first. As I walk to my opponent and we're hand fighting in here and he has inside control, I'm immediately going to roll my hands to the inside here. One, from this position right here, he's pushing on me. He has hands on me. I can outside step, do a near arm and far leg, or I can double knee drop and do a fireman's carry from this position. Again, trapping the arm, taking the step, finishing the technique. The other situation that you end up and you can do a fireman's carry out of, or a near arm far leg, is out of a front headlock. Say I have an underhook in this position here, my opponent buries his head, and I snap him to a front headlock here. I change to a front headlock position, and he's starting to back out, and I'm going to release this hand here. As I release and he starts to pop his head up, I'm now going to drop underneath and hit my fireman's carry. He's buried his head down in here. I snap to a front headlock, but now I'm going to allow his head to sneak out. And I'm squeezing him, pulling him down. As I do that, I loosen up. He pulls his head out, raises up, and then you're going to follow back underneath and finish with a fireman's carry.
Arsen Fadzaev uses bicep control to set up this near arm far leg carry. He then goes into a quick tilt for back exclusion. Rob Bider uses double bicep control to set up this fireman's carry. Here's an example of fireman's carry from front headlock position with Rob Bider.
The last fireman's carry that we're going to work on is what I call a head outside fireman's. And what makes this different, I'm in an over and under position. I'm going to have the arm trapped the same way, but rather than bringing my head to the inside, I'm going to keep it on the outside. So I'm in an over and under position here. From this position, right here, I've got his arm trapped with my elbow. Again, I have my hand, my thumb in. I trap his tricep right here. I'm going to bring this leg forward a little bit. I'm just going to take a little step backwards. As that leg comes forward, I now change levels, shoot, and take this leg down right here. Keeping the arm tight, raising up on the leg. From right here, don't get in a hurry. Just keep it right here, and he'll try to turn out of it. Make sure you get your points right here. Then you can slide up to the over and under. This technique is similar to a shoulder throw on top and a fireman's carry down on the leg. I'm in this position. I need to bring this leg forward. If it's back, I can't do this technique. Now I do that by just taking a little step back. I bring that leg back. I immediately change levels. That puts all the weight on this foot. As I do that, I now shoot this hand below the knee, down on the calf here, pulling on the arm, posting on my head in this tripod position. My right shoulder is heavy on his right shoulder, right here, pinning him to the mat. We call that a head outside fireman.
Rob Bider posts his opponent to the mat on his takedown attempt and then goes right into this outside fireman's carry. Here's a variation of this head outside carry with Tim Vanning.
The next set of takedowns we're going to work on are off of arm drags, or arm drag situations. First one we're going to do is an arm drag double leg. I sincerely believe this, that if any time he puts his hands on me, I should be able to hit an arm drag. And very simply, I mean this. As I walk into my opponent and he touches me in any place, when he touches me there, I have the opportunity, because this is my control point. I can take this down and hit an arm drag. I can take it to the outside and hit an arm drag. But anytime he touches me, whether it's my head, posting here, on my arm, I have the opportunity to take that control point and drag it. So the first technique we're going to do off of this is an arm drag double leg. I'm going to walk to him. As soon as he touches me, I'm going to chop this arm down, catch it, inside step, and hit my double leg.
Here's an example of this arm drag to a double leg takedown with Olympian David Hole of Canada.
The second technique we're going to work on is an arm drag and a trip. It'll be the same situation, only this time I'll do it off a different drag. I'll walk to him. When he posts, now I'm going to knock this to the outside, hit my arm drag here, and I'm going to step inside here. It's very important that I trip down below his knee. He touches, I hit my arm drag, and step here. I'm going to plant this foot. As I come down now, my momentum's going forward, and I'm posting so that I can't get rolled through. The arm drag creates an angle for me to do this technique. Trip. The next technique we're going to work on is an arm drag to a single leg. And I'm going to feed him my wrist. When he controls my wrist, I'm going to drag him and attack a single leg. As I walk to my partner, I feed him my wrist. As I do that, now I'm going to bring this hand across and down because I want to plant some weight on this foot. As I do that, I'm now going to arm drag and hit my single leg here. Right? Walk, I'm going to feed my opponent the wrist. As I do, I'm going to bring this down and across my body. As I do, I'm going to drag it, outside step to my single leg. Again, going up, working my single leg finishes.
World silver medalist Chris Wilson of Canada uses an arm drag to set up his single to a double attempt that goes out of bounds.
Technique, I'm going to hit a fake fireman's carry that'll set up my arm drag. As I walk to my opponent, I'm going to get inside control. When I reach for this leg here, the leg will go back. I immediately switch right up to this position, hit my arm drag. This hand will actually push this across. Once I've created an angle, I can now continue through with the double leg, or actually arm drag him all the way down. Fake to this position.
Arsene Fadzayev fakes to the leg and then arm drags to set up this takedown sequence. There are several more examples of the arm drag as a takedown.
The next set of takedown techniques that we work on will be ankle picks and knee picks. And the concept is the same for both of them. That's why I'm going to put them together. You'll be able to actually hit them out of both or the same tie-ups. Same setups, same contacts. You'll do the same thing with control points. The concept is this. If I want to take and attack this ankle, what I have to do is put weight on that ankle. So the way I do that is by moving his head directly over the point of attack. So if I'm going to do an ankle pick to this ankle, and I'm going to do it out of a head and bicep tie-up right here where I'm pushing on this, from right here I have to take this head and put it over that ankle. And there's a couple ways I can do that. One, I can just snap it to this point and shuck it. And once I get to this point right here, I want his head below my head. This is very important because I don't want him to be able to shuck me off. From here, now I'm going to change levels by bringing this head down and ankle picking. Try to avoid getting your head below your opponent's head. If that's to occur, if I get him in good position here, put this over here, but I end up coming below his head here, he has the ability to shut me off and get an easy takedown. So anytime you do an ankle pick or a knee pick, remember to keep your head above your opponent's head. Take his weight or your control point, put it over the ankle or the knee that you want to attack.
Here are several examples, excellent examples of this head-to-heel ankle pick.
The next ankle pick we're going to do is off an underhook. I've secured an underhook off my opponent by moving his head or possibly walking in, and he's getting wrist control. I'm going to feed him my wrist. As he's doing that, I'm now going to bring this hand down and force an underhook into this position. Remember the concept. Put the weight over the ankle or the heel you want to attack. If I want to attack this one out of an underhook, I'm going to bring him around here. Now I'm going to take this shoulder, put it right over the ankle I want to attack. From this position, I'm going to step to the attack point, chuck it off, catch my opponent, put him on his back. Underhook, ankle pick. If I want to attack this ankle, I'm just going to bring this ankle to me here, put this shoulder and the weight on it right here so he can't pick it up. From there, now I'm going to pick it up and chuck it off.
Cuba's Aldo Martinez uses an underhook to ankle pick to win a world championship in 1990. Here's a couple more examples of this underhook to ankle pick with Kenny Mundy, Olympic and world champion.
The next technique for an ankle pick is going to be off a 2-on-1 contact. I'm going to walk to my opponent. When he puts hands on me, I go to my 2-on-1 here. If I want to attack the far ankle, I'm going to take a step back. When that ankle comes up, I take my control point over the ankle I want to attack, right here. Now all the weight's on this, and he can't pick his ankle up. From there, I'm going to pick it and set him on his back. If I want to pick the near ankle off the 2-on-1, I get in this position right here. All the weight is down. I block this. Pick it up.
Olympic and world champion Bahadur Podgotchik of Russia uses a 2-on-1 to set up this ankle pick.
The next ankle pick we're going to do is off a front headlock. Walking to my opponent, he's burying his head. I'm going to snap his head down, go to a front headlock here. If I want to attack one of these ankles, say I want to attack the far ankle there, I'm going to bring it up by stepping back. Now I've put all the weight on this far ankle, and now I'm going to change levels, pick this ankle, and look for the pin.
Here's a couple of examples of this front headlock to an ankle pick with former world champion and Olympic medalist Zeke Jones of the USA.
All the techniques that we use for an ankle pick are the same for a knee pick. So a guy with short arms, I've gotten to where I like the knee picks actually better than the ankle picks. For the simple fact, the technique is exactly the same for getting a position, and I don't have to reach as far. For example, head and bicep tie up, knee pick. I'm going to take this head, put it over this knee, and attack it. Couple ways to do it. One, I can bring it to me. As I do that, I now put all the weight over it. But rather than reaching to the ankle, I just reach to the knee and run through it. Right? Head and bicep tie up. If that knee's back and I don't want to step backwards, what I'll do is just drive right over it in this position. Run through it here. As I hook the knee, this hand is just a hook, and I just post right here. But remember, in this position, it's very important for me to keep my head above my opponent's head, keeping this in that. The next technique I can do a knee pick is off an underhook. Again, I'm going to take a step back, bring this leg forward, take this shoulder, put it over the knee. Once I get in a position where I block the knee, I have the underhook, I take this over it, here, I'm hooking, now I'm going to shuck this off as I continue on.
2-on-1.
Knee pick, now I'm going to do a knee pick off the 2-on-1 tie-up. Walk to him when he touches here, again, I want that far leg, so I'm going to take a step back. Now I'm going to take my contact point over, lock the knee. The next technique I'm going to do is a knee pick off of elbow control. And all I'm going to do is walk to my opponent. When he tries to block me off on the inside, I'm going to take his elbow across my body, the contact point across my body to the far knee. I walk to him, he's posting here. I'm now just going to take this elbow, I'm going to take a little step back, right here. Once I have contact on this elbow, I take it right over the knee I want to attack and take him down. A lot of times you'll be in here fighting for position, and I can very easily just pass this by in this position here. Once I pass it by, I'm going to take this elbow to the far knee, run it over, take him down. Do it to the other side. Here, he fights for inside position when his hand rolls like it did there. We're fighting back and forth. I'm going to take this across, take the knee. Remember, all you have to do an ankle pick or a knee pick is take your contact point, whether it's a wrist, an elbow, a head, or a shoulder, put it directly over the point you want to attack, and you'll be able to do ankle picks and knee picks.
Here's a textbook example of an underhook to a knee pick with Olympic and world champion Bruce Baumgartner of the United States. Here's another excellent example of this underhook to a knee pick with former world champion Melvin Douglas. Here we see an example of an overhook to a knee pick with Bruce Baumgartner. Over and under position, here's a variation of this knee pick with Alejandro Puerto, Olympic champion from Cuba.